My name is Leo, I'm 27, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the background character in my own family's story. I'm the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who never causes trouble but also never seems to deserve any recognition. My parents and my younger brother, Marcus, always had this way of orbiting around each other, loud, demanding, and constantly expecting me to just accept whatever role they assigned me. I used to tell myself I didn't mind, that being overlooked meant I could avoid the drama. But the truth? Being invisible in your own home eats away at you until it's all you think about. Marcus was always the golden child. He's 2 years younger, but from the moment he kicked a soccer ball, he was the star. My parents went to every one of his games, screamed from the sidelines, hosted parties for his achievements. When I came home with good grades, they'd nod and say, "That's expected." When Marcus scored 1 goal, even if his team lost, it was like a holiday. Birthdays were the same. His would be a parade of balloons, cakes, expensive gifts. Mine were usually dinner at home, and maybe a sweater I didn't want. It wasn't the lack of things that hurt. It was the message that my efforts were ordinary, while his were extraordinary. I tried to play it off. I tried to be supportive. I didn't want to be the jealous brother. But inside, I carried this quiet ache every time they brushed me aside. Still, I kept pushing myself. Through college, through internships, through sleepless nights working on projects that no one in my family ever asked about. While Marcus partied his way through university, I was grinding. And even though they didn't see it, I knew deep down that one day it would matter. That day came when I got nominated for an award in my field. It wasn't some small recognition either. It was the kind of award that could change the trajectory of my career. Months of hard work, late nights, and sacrifices had led to this moment. For once, something big had my name on it, and I wanted my family to be there. Against my better judgment, I reached for my phone and typed a message into the family group chat. "I'm receiving an award tonight. It would mean a lot if you came." I hesitated before pressing send, part of me already knowing how this might play out, but still hoping that maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise me. The typing bubble appeared almost immediately. It was Marcus. "We're going to a concert instead," he wrote. Just like that. No hesitation, no consideration, not even a question about what kind of award it was. A concert. Some band he probably wouldn't even remember in a month. Before I could even process the sting of that, my mom chimed in. "Don't guilt us," she typed, like my request was some kind of burden, like I was asking them to choose between breathing and suffocating. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. I felt this wave of heat crawl up my neck. I wanted to scream, to demand why it was always like this, why I never mattered. But instead, I just typed back 2 words, "All right." And I meant it. Not in the way they thought. Not in the way that meant I'd accept being sidelined again. Something inside me shifted in that moment. I wasn't a kid anymore waiting for their approval. I wasn't desperate for their claps or their cheers. That night, I would stand in front of a crowd that actually saw me, that actually valued what I'd built. And my family. They'd be exactly where they chose to be. What none of them knew was that this award ceremony wasn't some quiet, backroom event. It was going to be broadcast live. Not just streamed online, but televised. Cameras, interviews, the works. My name would be announced, my face on the screen, my story told. And when it happened, when the spotlight finally found me, the people who had spent years making me feel invisible would have no choice but to see me, alongside everyone else watching. But before that moment arrived, I had to sit with the familiar ache of disappointment. I remember pacing my small apartment that afternoon, rehearsing what I'd say if they asked later why I didn't push harder for them to come. Should I guilt them back? Should I explain how much it meant to me? Or should I let the silence do the talking? My mind spun in circles, and yet beneath it all, there was this strange calm, like I was standing on the edge of something bigger than the years of neglect behind me. The award was one thing, but the real shift was happening inside me. For once, I wasn't just enduring their absence. I was letting it fuel me. Every dismissive comment, every ignored milestone, every shrug at my success, it was all building to this. And even though they had no idea, I was already writing the next chapter in our family story. That evening, as I slipped on the suit I'd bought months earlier with money I'd saved, my phone buzzed again. Marcus had sent a picture. Him and his friends grinning outside the concert venue, holding drinks, his caption reading, "Best night ever." Mom liked the message with a heart. Dad replied, "Enjoy it, You deserve it. My hand tightened around the phone. Deserve. That word echoed in my head. All my life, it seemed like Marcus deserved everything, and I was supposed to just nod along. I set the phone down, took a deep breath, and walked out the door. I didn't know it yet, but by the end of that night, the image on their screens would leave them speechless in a way they'd never been before. I sat in the back of the cab on the way to the ceremony, staring out at the city lights blurring past the window. The world outside seemed alive, buzzing with energy, like it was in sync with me for once. But inside, I felt heavy. The image of that group chat kept flashing in my mind. Marcus laughing at his concert, Mom cheering him on, Dad chiming in with words he hadn't used for me in years. That word, deserve, echoed over and over, like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. It wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising. If I'm honest, I'd seen it coming since childhood. My parents had this way of measuring everything I did against Marcus, and somehow, I always came up short. When I got a scholarship for college, they said, "That's great, Leo, but don't brag. Your brother is still figuring things out." When Marcus got into a local league team, they treated him like he'd just signed with Barcelona. I still remember a Christmas years ago. I'd saved up my allowance and part-time job money to buy Dad a nice watch, something I knew he'd been eyeing. When he opened it, he smiled politely, said, "Thanks, son," and set it aside. Later that night, Marcus gave him a cheap keychain from a gas station with a soccer ball charm, and Dad laughed, clipped it onto his keys, and said, "Now this is special." Everyone clapped and teased Marcus for being thoughtful. I sat there quietly, holding back the sting in my throat. The pattern only got worse as we got older. Marcus wrecked his car once after a night out. My parents rushed to comfort him, bought him a newer model, and said, "Don't be too hard on yourself. Mistakes happen." When my car broke down from wear and tear because I couldn't afford a replacement, Dad shook his head and said, "You should have planned better, Leo." No sympathy, no help, just disappointment. And yet, I kept hoping that one day they'd see me, that one day they'd sit in the audience, clapping until their hands stung, smiling like they were proud of me. That's why the award mattered. It wasn't just a recognition from strangers. It was proof that my life, my choices, and my hard work had value. Proof that I wasn't the shadow they made me out to be. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized they didn't want to see it. It wasn't that they couldn't, it was that they wouldn't. Marcus's glow was easier to bask in. He was loud, charismatic, messy in a way they could excuse. I was quiet, steady, a reminder of responsibility they didn't want to acknowledge. That week leading up to the ceremony, I tried to test the waters. I mentioned the nomination to Mom on the phone. She hummed distractedly, then asked if I'd seen Marcus's new haircut. I told Dad the award was from one of the biggest organizations in my field. He nodded and said, "That's good, but have you thought about maybe moving back closer to home? Marcus could use your help with some bills." It was like every conversation found its way back to him. The final straw before the ceremony was when I visited home a month earlier. I hadn't been in a while, and I thought maybe we'd sit down and talk. Instead, I walked into the living room to find the mantel covered in Marcus's trophies, medals, framed photos. Soccer tournaments, birthdays, random milestones. My own graduation photo wasn't there anymore. I asked Mom about it, and she just said, "Oh, we had to make room. It's in the drawer." The drawer. Like my entire existence could be tucked away, forgotten. So when I saw their responses in the group chat that night, I realized I had been clinging to a fantasy. They weren't coming. They never would. The ceremony wasn't for them. It was for me. And yet, some bitter part of me wanted them to see. Not just hear about it later, not just brush it off when I mentioned it months down the road, but see it, live, with no way to escape. The cab pulled up to the venue, and I stepped out into a wash of light and noise. Reporters stood by the doors, cameras flashing as nominees walked the carpet. My stomach knotted. This was real. This was my moment. As I walked forward, adjusting my tie, I could almost hear Marcus's voice mocking me, "Don't guilt us." I could hear Mom saying, "We're busy." And beneath it all, Dad's word, "deserve." That word didn't sting anymore. Not in the same way. Because tonight, I'd prove exactly what I deserved. But the rising tension wasn't just about them not showing up. Something else was stirring inside me, a mix of anger, pride, and a quiet plan forming in the back of my mind. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I wasn't going to let this be just another moment they ignored. This time, they wouldn't get to look away. And the timing couldn't have been more perfect, because what I didn't know until I arrived was that the organizers had a surprise in store. The awards ceremony wasn't just being broadcast on local TV, it was airing nationally. My name, my face, my story, all of it was about to be spotlighted far beyond what I'd imagined. I smiled to myself, though the ache in my chest was still there. For years, I'd been pushed aside, minimized, treated like I didn't matter. Tonight, all of that would change, not because they wanted it to, but because they wouldn't have a choice. And as I stood in line waiting to check in, I pulled out my phone one more time. I stared at the family group chat, at Marcus's photo from the concert, at Mom's heart reaction, at Dad's words. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to send them one last message, a final chance. Something simple, like, it's being televised. But then I stopped. No, let them find out the way the rest of the country would. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, straightened my shoulders, and walked inside. The ceremony had this surreal energy, almost dreamlike. I'd been to events before, but nothing like this. Cameras sweeping across the crowd, flashes of light, people in sharp suits and elegant dresses. Everyone buzzing with anticipation. As I checked in, they handed me a small envelope with my seat number and a badge with my name on it in bold letters. Leo Harrison, nominee. I turned it over in my hands, letting the weight of it sink in. I should have felt pure excitement, but something gnawed at me. That gnawing turned into a sharp twist when I glanced at my phone again just before the ceremony started. The family group chat lit up with notifications. Marcus had posted a string of pictures from the concert. Him, beaming with his arm around his friends, holding beers in plastic cups. Another photo of the stage lights. Another of him posing with some band member he probably begged for a selfie with. He captioned one, "Best night of my life." I scrolled further. Mom had commented, "So proud of you, sweetheart," followed by clapping emojis. Dad added, "You earned this, son." Nothing like making memories. That was the moment. That was the knife. Not just the fact that they didn't show up for me, but that they were celebrating Marcus's night like it was some grand accomplishment. I sat there, in my tailored suit, with months of effort about to culminate in one of the most important nights of my life, and my own parents couldn't be bothered to notice. Worse, they were spending their words of pride on him, on a random concert, on something fleeting. My chest tightened. I thought back to every little slight, every moment I'd brushed off. My graduation picture stuffed in a drawer. The cheap keychain treated like a treasure, while my carefully chosen gift was ignored. The time I told Dad I'd landed my first job out of college, and he barely looked up from the TV before asking if Marcus needed help with rent. I'd swallowed all of it, quietly, because I thought maybe someday it would be different. But staring at those messages, I realized the truth. It was never going to be different. The betrayal wasn't just in their absence. It was in the way they made it clear that no matter what I did, I'd never be enough, not compared to him. They didn't just overlook me. They actively chose to invest their pride, their love, their words of encouragement somewhere else. And this wasn't childhood anymore. I wasn't a kid hoping for approval. I was a man, sitting in a room filled with people who actually respected what I'd accomplished, while my family cheered from the sidelines of someone else's life. The ceremony began, lights dimming, music swelling. My thoughts should have been on the stage, on the speeches, on the possibility of hearing my name called. But all I could see was that group chat. My brother's grin, my parents' applause, not for me, but for him. I felt my hands tremble slightly as I set the phone face down on my leg. I took a breath, but it didn't calm me. The sting turned into a burn, and the burn into something sharper. My trust in them, what little I had left, was gone. Something inside me shifted that night, hard and permanent. I wasn't just disappointed anymore. I was done. It was almost poetic, in a cruel way. At the exact moment I was on the cusp of being seen by the world, the people who should have been my first and loudest cheerleaders proved once again that they never would be. The contrast was unbearable. It was like watching two versions of my life collide. The one where I was invisible at home, and the one where I was finally recognized outside of it. I didn't know it then, but that moment, the sight of my family showering Marcus with pride while I sat alone in that ballroom, was the breaking point. The emotional line I could never cross back over. From that point on, everything I did, everything I planned, everything that was about to unfold, it wasn't about winning them over anymore. It was about something else entirely. And as the announcer walked onto the stage, the cameras panning across the audience. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the bright lights above. My jaw tightened, and I felt a strange calm wash over me. If they weren't going to see me by choice, then they'd see me by force. The ceremony unfolded like a dream, but inside, I was drowning. I sat there in a room filled with strangers applauding speeches, the clink of glasses echoing, and I felt like I was split in two. On the outside, I smiled when the cameras panned past, clapped politely for other winners, and nodded at the conversations happening around me. On the inside, I was spiraling. When they called my name, yes, my name, I walked onto that stage and accepted the award with my hands steady and my voice clear, but I barely heard myself. I remember flashes, the blinding lights, the weight of the trophy in my hand, the crowd rising in a standing ovation. I must have said something coherent, because later people congratulated me on how inspiring my words had been. But in that moment, my mind was stuck somewhere else. It wasn't on the applause in front of me. It was on the silence behind me, the absence of the only people who should have been there. As I stood there holding that award, a piece of me broke off, like a rope finally snapping after years of strain. The little boy who wanted his parents to say, "We're proud of you," died quietly on that stage. The night ended in celebration. There were photos, interviews, new connections. Everyone around me was smiling, shaking my hand, telling me I had a bright future ahead. And yet, when I got back to my apartment, the walls felt colder than ever. I set the award on my desk and just stared at it. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, it felt like ashes in my mouth. I opened my phone. Of course, the family chat was still buzzing. Marcus had posted more concert videos, my parents gushing over them, Dad writing, "Wish we could do nights like this more often." I scrolled and scrolled, waiting to see even a passing mention of me, a question about how my night went, a simple good luck message. There was nothing, not a word. I turned the phone face down, lay back on the couch, and just stared at the ceiling. My chest felt hollow, like all the air had been sucked out of me. It hit me then, I was on my own. Not just physically, but emotionally. They'd never be the family I wanted. That was my rock bottom. I didn't cry. Not that night. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something heavier, more resigned. The kind of silence that comes when you finally stop arguing with reality. And in that silence, something else stirred, something sharper. I thought back on all the times I had bent myself into knots trying to earn their approval. The late-night phone calls where I'd downplay my own achievements so Marcus wouldn't feel overshadowed. The weekends I'd spend helping Dad with chores around the house while Marcus went off to parties, only to be told later that your brother has so much on his plate, you should be more supportive. The birthdays, the graduations, the job offers, moments where I should have been celebrated but was always told to keep it down, not make things about me. It all replayed in my head like a cruel highlight reel. And then came the realization that shook me to my core. I had wasted years begging for scraps of validation that would never come. That was the moment the planning began, not consciously at first, but quietly, like seeds being planted in the dark. I didn't think, how do I get revenge? Not yet. It started simpler. I thought, how do I step away? How do I build something so far beyond them that they can never touch it, never diminish it, never stuff it in a drawer? The answer wasn't immediate. It wasn't even clear, but the shift had started. I could feel it in the way I looked at the award on my desk, not as a prize, but as a reminder. A reminder that I didn't need them to make me visible, that I was capable of being seen, whether they wanted to acknowledge it or not. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. Every family call I ignored, every group chat notification I silenced. It was like tearing muscle from bone. I'd been conditioned for years to chase their approval, and walking away felt unnatural, painful. But every time I reached for my phone to respond, I forced myself to stop. They didn't notice. Not really. Mom sent a few casual messages, mostly about Marcus's games. Dad forwarded articles he thought I'd find useful, never once asking about my work. Marcus filled the chat with photos of his nights out, new clothes, random jokes. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody mentioned the award. And in that void, in that suffocating silence, I started to build. I buried myself in work, not as an escape, but as fuel. I started taking meetings I'd been too hesitant to schedule before. I reached out to mentors I'd been shy about contacting. I said yes to opportunities that scared me. Every night, I told myself, this is for me. not for them. But deep down, another voice whispered, one day they'll see. One day, they won't be able to ignore you. That thought scared me at first, because it sounded bitter, vengeful. But the more I sat with it, the more it felt like clarity. I wasn't plotting their downfall, not then. But I was done protecting them from the truth. Done letting their neglect define me. Done pretending their favoritism didn't matter. And though I couldn't see the full picture yet, I knew one thing with certainty. When the moment came, I wouldn't let it pass quietly. The shift in me didn't happen overnight. It was subtle, almost invisible at first. But in the weeks and months after the award, I began to notice the changes stacking up like bricks, each one forming a wall between the old me, the one who lived for scraps of recognition from my family, and the new me who didn't need them anymore. It started with opportunities that came pouring in after the ceremony. The award had put my name in the spotlight, and suddenly doors that once felt bolted shut cracked open. Companies reached out, people I admired asked to collaborate, and mentors who barely noticed me before were calling me directly. At first, I felt like an imposter, like maybe I didn't belong in these conversations. But slowly, I realized something I'd never allowed myself to believe. I had earned all of it. I took on projects that terrified me, projects I would have once avoided because I was afraid of failing and hearing my family say, "See, you're not cut out for this." But without their voices in my ear, I felt lighter. And when I succeeded, it wasn't just a win professionally. It was proof to myself that I didn't need their approval to be great. My life began to change in ways they couldn't imagine. I moved into a better apartment, one with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. I started dressing differently, sharper suits, clothes that reflected the man I was becoming instead of the quiet shadow I used to be. My confidence grew, and people noticed. Strangers at networking events gravitated toward me. Colleagues looked to me for leadership, and even the mentors I once looked up to started treating me as an equal. Meanwhile, my family's world stayed exactly the same. Marcus was still the center of their attention, still posting photos of nights out and soccer games. Mom and Dad cheered him on with the same tired enthusiasm, as if his every move was groundbreaking. But from my new vantage point, it looked different. For the first time, I saw it clearly, not as a reflection of my inadequacy, but as a reflection of their limitations. They didn't know how to value anything outside of the easy, familiar glow Marcus provided. I stopped craving their attention, and in its place, I started to enjoy a new kind of power, invisibility by choice. They didn't ask about my life, so I didn't offer details. When Mom called, I kept the conversations polite but short. When Dad asked if I could help your brother out financially, because apparently Marcus was behind on rent again, I simply said, "I can't," and left it at that. For once, I didn't bend myself into knots trying to justify my boundaries. I didn't over-explain, didn't apologize. I just let the silence hang. They didn't push much. I think they assumed I was still quietly plodding along, the same dependable Leo who would always be there when they needed something. They had no idea how much had changed. And a part of me took a quiet satisfaction in that I was building something so much bigger than they could comprehend, right under their noses. But success has a way of multiplying when you stop holding yourself back. Within a year, I wasn't just respected in my field. I was becoming a name people recognized. Invitations to speak at conferences rolled in. Articles were written about the work I was doing. I even got invited to sit on panels alongside people I'd once studied in school. Every time I saw my name in print, every time a microphone was handed to me, I felt the weight of years of invisibility lifting. Yet, in the quiet moments, when the applause faded and I was alone in my apartment, I couldn't help but think of them. Not with longing anymore, but with a kind of detached curiosity. What would they say if they knew? Would they finally see me? Or would they find a way to twist it, to make it about Marcus somehow? The thought didn't hurt the way it used to. Now, it just fueled me. The turning point came when I was invited to a national event, bigger than the award ceremony, bigger than anything I'd done before. A televised gala celebrating innovators and leaders across different industries. When the invitation arrived, I held the embossed envelope in my hands and let out a laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it felt like fate. I knew instantly that this was it, the kind of moment you can't hide from, the kind of spotlight that reaches even the most stubborn corners. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just going to step into that spotlight. I was going to own it. Still, I kept quiet. I didn't mention it to my family. I didn't hint at the scale of what was coming. Let them keep cheering Marcus on. Let them keep assuming I was just managing. When the night came, they'd find out along with everyone else. And that's when I realized I wasn't just rising. I was preparing. Slowly, quietly, I was setting the stage for something bigger than success. Something that went beyond proving myself. Because one day soon, they wouldn't just have to acknowledge me. They'd have to confront what they had done. The years they'd spent ignoring, dismissing, and underestimating me. And when that day came, I wasn't sure if I wanted their apology. What I wanted was for them to feel what I had felt. The sting of being invisible, the hollow ache of realizing you'd missed something monumental. The invitation to that national gala sat on my desk for weeks, its embossed lettering catching the light whenever I walked by. I'd glance at it casually, but inside, I felt a hum of electricity every time I saw it. This wasn't just another award or speaking event. This was the kind of platform that could cement me in the public eye, a spotlight so wide and so bright that even people who had spent their entire lives refusing to look at me would have no choice but to see. But the real setup for what was to come didn't happen on the night of the gala itself. It began months earlier, when the opportunities from my award snowballed into something larger than I could have imagined. One of the companies I partnered with after my first big recognition was a media group, a powerful one, with connections across TV, print, and online platforms. At first, it was just a collaboration. I'd contribute to their projects, provide expertise, and in return, they'd give me visibility. But as time went on, I realized they weren't just interested in what I could provide, they were interested in me. My story, my perspective, my ability to connect with an audience. It was a strange shift, to go from being overlooked by my own family to suddenly being sought after by strangers with influence. I remember sitting in a glass-walled office one afternoon, the city stretching behind me, as one of the executives leaned forward and said, "Leo, people don't just respect your work. They relate to you. That's rare. Have you thought about what you could do with a bigger platform?" That sentence stuck with me. A bigger platform. Not just recognition within my field, but something beyond it. Something public, visible. And for the first time, I saw how all the years of being silenced and dismissed could actually become fuel. If I leaned into it, if I let the world hear the story I'd lived through, people might see themselves in me. Over the next few months, I started accepting interviews. Podcasts, magazines, panels. At first, I kept my answers strictly professional, talking about my work, my projects, my goals. But slowly, I began to open up. I spoke about resilience, about being underestimated, about working in silence when no one believes in you. I didn't name my family, of course, but I didn't need to. The message resonated on its own. The response shocked me. People flooded my inbox with messages. I felt invisible too. "Thank you for saying what so many of us have lived. You gave me hope." It was humbling, but it was also clarifying. I wasn't just rising for myself anymore. My story, my survival in the shadows, was giving voice to others. And the more visible I became, the more powerful I felt. Meanwhile, my family remained oblivious. Calls were still about Marcus, his soccer league, his new girlfriend, his plans that never seemed to go anywhere. When Dad asked once if I was still at that same job, I almost laughed. He had no idea that I'd been promoted twice or that my name had appeared in major publications. Mom complained that I didn't visit enough, that Marcus missed me. Every conversation was a rerun of the same script, their world too small to notice the one I was quietly building outside of them. And I let them stay blind. I didn't correct them, didn't brag, didn't hint. The silence became my weapon. Then came the meeting that changed everything. The organizers of the National Gala invited me not only to attend, but to receive a special recognition, a Lifetime Achievement Award, despite my age, for the groundbreaking work I'd done in my field. I nearly laughed when I read the email. Lifetime achievement. At 27. The scale of it was absurd, but it was real. And it was going to be broadcast live across the country. When I walked into the planning session for the gala, I expected to discuss logistics, time slots, speeches, wardrobe. What I didn't expect was for the director to lean across the table and say, "We'd like to feature your story as part of the televised broadcast. Not just your work, but your journey. We think people need to hear it." My chest tightened. For a moment, I pictured Marcus, my parents, sitting at home, maybe flipping through channels and stumbling across me on their TV screens. Hearing my story not as a family member they could dismiss, but as a narrative presented to the entire nation. I agreed, of course, but inside, I realized what this meant. The setup was complete. All the years of being minimized, all the invisible wounds, all the swallowed words, they were about to be spoken aloud, framed in a way that no one could ignore. The irony was almost too sharp. My family had accused me of guilting them for asking to be seen. Now, they were going to hear my truth whether they wanted to or not, delivered not in a private plea they could brush off, but in a broadcast they couldn't escape. And though I didn't know exactly how they'd react, I knew one thing for certain. By the end of that night, the balance of power between us would never be the same. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of weight that presses against your ribs. I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room, adjusting the cuffs of my suit, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was dressing up to impress anyone. Not my parents, not Marcus, not even the audience I was about to face. I was doing this for me. And, in a way, for that younger version of me who had sat silently at dinner tables while everyone else praised Marcus's latest achievement. The venue was dazzling, a cathedral of lights and velvet, cameras perched like hawks waiting to swoop. As I walked the red carpet, reporters leaned forward with their microphones, calling my name. I answered calmly, confidently, never once letting on that my mind was somewhere else, half on the stage I was about to step onto, half on the living room I imagined back home. I could see it in my mind, the TV flickering, my parents settling into the couch after their long day, Marcus sprawled with his phone in hand, all of them expecting another ordinary evening. And then, my face would fill the screen. The program unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Speeches, performances, applause in all the right places. I waited, each minute ratcheting up the tension inside me. When my category finally came, the announcer's voice boomed across the hall, recounting my achievements, my projects, my rise from obscurity. I could feel the cameras lock onto me, the heat of the lights pressing against my skin. My heart raced, but not from nerves, from anticipation. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer concluded, please welcome tonight's honoree, Leo Harrison. The applause rose like a wave as I stepped onto the stage. My shoes clicked against the polished floor, each step heavier than the last, like I was walking not just into the spotlight, but into a reckoning. The host handed me the award, sleek and gleaming. I shook his hand, smiled, and turned to face the crowd. 1,000 eyes looked up at me, millions more through the cameras. Somewhere among them, maybe at that exact moment, were the three faces I'd spent a lifetime waiting to see. I leaned into the microphone. My voice was steady. Thank you, I began, pausing to let the room settle. This award means more to me than recognition of my work. It represents something deeper, what it means to be seen, truly seen, after years of being invisible. A hush fell. My words weren't technical, weren't about my field. They were personal, deliberate. I grew up in a family where attention was selective, where achievements were compared, measured, and often dismissed. For years, I believed I wasn't enough. That no matter how hard I worked, it would never be worthy of applause. I thought invisibility was my fate. I let that hang in the air. I didn't name Marcus, didn't mention my parents directly, but the weight of my story filled the room. But invisibility, I continued, can be a powerful teacher. It forces you to work in silence, to grow roots deep enough to hold when no one is watching. It teaches you resilience. And when the moment comes, when the light finally does find you, you're ready to stand tall in it. The crowd shifted. Some nodded, others leaned forward. I could feel them connecting. I stand here tonight not just because of what I've done, but because of what I've endured. To anyone who has ever been overlooked, dismissed, or told they didn't deserve to be seen, I want you to know, you do. You always did. And your moment will come. Applause broke out, swelling like thunder. Cameras flashed. But in my mind, I wasn't hearing the audience in front of me. I was picturing the silence back home, the stunned expressions, the tightening jaws, the realization that the son and brother they'd ignored was now speaking not just to them, but to an entire nation. The speech wasn't about revenge in the loud, vengeful sense. It was calm, measured, almost tender. But that's what made it sting sharper. I hadn't lashed out. I hadn't begged. I had simply laid out the truth they had spent years denying, and delivered it in a way that millions of others applauded. As I stepped off the stage, award in hand, I knew the execution was complete. The revenge wasn't in humiliating them directly. It was in making sure that when they looked at that screen, they couldn't escape the reality. I had risen without them, above them, beyond them. And they had missed it. The night after the gala, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Messages poured in, colleagues, mentors, even strangers who had watched the broadcast. People told me my words had moved them, that they saw themselves in my story. Some called me brave. Others just said, "Thank you." For the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of being visible, and it wasn't just recognition, it was resonance. But among the dozens of glowing notifications, 3 stood out. The family group chat. At first, it was silent. I imagined the shock that must have rippled through their living room when my face appeared on national TV, speaking truths they'd spent years ignoring. Then, finally, a message appeared. From Mom. "Leo, why didn't you tell us it was such a big event?" I stared at it, letting the words sink in. Not, "We're proud of you." Not, "We're sorry we missed it." Just the same deflection, the same refusal to take responsibility. As if the burden was on me for not forcing them to care. A second message followed, this time from Dad. "You made us sound like terrible parents on live television. Do you realize what people will think?" I let out a laugh. Not bitter, not angry, just a small, disbelieving laugh. Even now, their first instinct was to worry about appearances, about how they were seen, not about what they had done. Then Marcus chimed in. "Wow, bro, a little dramatic, don't you think? You made it sound like we ignored you your whole life." Chill, it's not that deep. That was the moment. The final nail. I felt a clarity wash over me so sharp, it was almost peaceful. They hadn't changed. They never would. And I didn't need them to. I didn't reply to the group chat. Instead, I typed 3 separate messages. To Mom. I spent years begging to be noticed. Last night, I finally was. You had your chance. To Dad. You're right. People will think you were terrible parents. That's because you were. And to Marcus. It was that deep. It always was. You just never had to feel it. Then I muted the chat and set the phone down. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt or longing or anger. I just felt free. Word spread quickly after the gala. Relatives who'd barely spoken to me before reached out, congratulating me, telling me how proud they were. Old teachers emailed, saying they'd watched me on TV and remembered the quiet kid who sat in the back of the classroom. Even neighbors sent notes, saying they had no idea I'd accomplished so much. My parents? They couldn't escape it. Their friends saw the broadcast, their coworkers mentioned it. Even people at church brought it up. Everywhere they turned, their eye was visible, undeniable. The son they dismissed had become the story they couldn't avoid. In the weeks that followed, they tried to mend the rift. Mom called, leaving voicemails laced with forced cheer. Dad sent long texts about misunderstandings. Marcus, predictably, made a joke of it, saying I'd overplayed the neglect. But the difference now was simple. I didn't answer. Not with silence born of defeat, but with silence born of choice. My life surged forward. New projects, new platforms, new horizons. And every success only widened the gap. The more the world applauded me, the smaller their excuses sounded. One evening, months later, I walked into my apartment after another event and set down a second award on the shelf beside the first. The city lights shimmered through my window, reflecting off the trophies, bathing the room in gold. For a moment, I thought of that drawer at home, the one where Mom had stuffed my graduation photo to make space for Marcus's trophies. I smiled. My achievements weren't in a drawer anymore. They were out in the open, on display for anyone to see. And the people who had once shoved me into the shadows? They were left blinking in the light, too late to shield their eyes. That was my revenge. Not shouting, not vengeance in the traditional sense, but living so fully, so visibly, that their years of neglect became their legacy, not mine. I poured myself a glass of wine, stood by the window, and let the quiet of the city night settle around me. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like I was waiting for anyone to clap. I had written my own story, and the final line belonged to me. My name's Ryan, I'm 28, and for the last few years, I've tried my best to keep a low profile when it comes to family events. Not because I hate my family or anything, but because, well, let's just say I was unofficially labeled the disappointment a long time ago. I don't have a flashy job, I'm not married with kids, and I didn't go into law or medicine like my cousins. I work in IT, freelance mostly, and I enjoy the quiet life. But to my Aunt Linda, the undisputed queen of family image, quiet equals failure. So when she leaned into my window that afternoon and whispered, "Try not to embarrass us tonight," I just smiled and nodded. Then I turned off the engine, got out, walked around to the back seat, and calmly took the cake I had custom ordered, the pile of neatly wrapped birthday gifts I'd bought with my own money, and, perhaps most importantly, the key to the rented party venue I had booked weeks ago. Then I got back in the car, shut the door, and drove away. The party was for my cousin Emily's 18th birthday, Aunt Linda's youngest and the golden child of the family. Straight A's, athletic, pretty, always perfectly dressed. Emily was actually sweet, which made this whole thing more complicated. She'd asked me, not her mom, to help organize her birthday. Said she wanted something chill, not over the top. Something that felt like her, not another gala where Aunt Linda paraded her around like a debutante. So I'd taken the reins quietly, booked a venue by the lake, got her favorite cake from a local bakery, ordered gifts I knew she'd love, and even printed out little Polaroids from her childhood to hang around the room. It was supposed to be a simple, beautiful night. But the thing about Aunt Linda is, nothing is ever about anyone but her. And when I told her last week that Emily wanted things low-key, she fake laughed and said, "Oh, Ryan, you don't have to cover for her shyness. She'll love what I have planned." I should have pushed back more. But at this point, I was used to being steamrolled. I didn't even know what I have planned meant until the morning of the party, when I got a call from a very confused caterer asking about setup. Turns out, Aunt Linda had taken it upon herself to also book a party planner, a photographer, and a DJ, all set to arrive at a completely different venue, some fancy banquet hall halfway across town. She had no idea I'd already paid the deposit on the lakeside venue. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. When I texted her asking what was going on, she replied with a thumbs-up emoji and "Don't worry, I'm handling it," smiley face, which was basically code for "back off, peasant." I told Emily. She sounded disappointed but not surprised. "Just come to the one you planned," she said. "If it's just us and a few people, that's fine. I just want to be with people who get me." So that was the plan. Or it was, until I pulled up outside Aunt Linda's house to help with transportation, because I'm a fool who still thought maybe, just maybe, things could be salvaged. That's when she leaned in through the window in her gold-accented cardigan, gave me that pinched smile, and whispered, "Try not to embarrass us tonight." Like I was the help. Like everything I had done up to that point, the planning, the money, the effort, meant nothing. That was the last straw. As I drove away with the cake and the gifts and the key to the real venue, my phone buzzed with texts from my mom asking where I was. I didn't answer. I just drove to the lakeside spot, opened up the venue, and set everything up the way Emily and I had talked about. Soft lighting, photo wall, her favorite music playlist humming in the background, a table stacked with personalized little gift bags I'd stayed up all night making. The cake looked amazing, vanilla with strawberry layers, frosted in soft pastels with 18 years of awesome, written in loopy cursive. I poured myself a soda and sat on the edge of one of the chairs, waiting. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Then I got the text from Emily. "Everyone's just standing around." What happened? My stomach dropped. I called her. No answer. Then I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring. "Where are you?" she hissed, like I'd abandoned a battlefield. "Everyone's here. Emily's crying. And your aunt is furious." I swallowed hard. "I'm at the venue. The one Emily asked for." "What venue?" she barked, clearly already rattled. "Everyone's at the Goldview Banquet Center." She didn't want the Goldview. She said she wanted something small. "I booked it weeks ago. She asked me to." There was a pause on the line. A long one. Then, "Well, you didn't tell anyone that. Your aunt had a whole thing planned." "No," I said, my voice getting quieter. She had a thing planned for herself. Not for Emily. I hung up. I stared at my phone for a few minutes, watching the unread messages pile up. A few from cousins asking if I was okay. One from Uncle James asking if I was pulling another stunt. Then, finally, a message from Emily. "Can I come to your place?" I texted her the address to the real venue. 15 minutes later, she walked through the door. Her makeup was smudged. Her dress looked stiff, like something from a fashion magazine shoot. Not her style at all. She kicked off the heels and slipped into a pair of Converse from her bag. Then she looked around at the room and just stood there, silent, soaking it in. The cake, the lights, the music, the Polaroids, her actual childhood, her actual preferences, reflected in every corner. "This is perfect," she said. I nodded. My throat felt tight. I'd never seen her cry before, but there were tears in her eyes now. Then she said, "My mom's gonna be mad." I laughed. "Yeah," I said. I figured. The night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because while Emily was with me, barefoot and eating cake in the dim glow of string lights, the rest of the family was back at the Goldview, and Aunt Linda was lighting matches in her mind. And I knew. It was only a matter of time before the fire reached us. And sure enough, the first spark came 10 minutes later. A car pulled up. Fast. Then another. I glanced out the window and saw Aunt Linda getting out, phone pressed to her ear, eyes scanning the venue like a hawk. Emily froze beside me. "She followed my location," she whispered. I stood up. This was going to get messy, but I didn't regret a thing. Not yet. Not until Aunt Linda walked through that door with the kind of storm in her face that could rip a person apart. And behind her, dragging their feet, came my mom, my uncle, and a few other relatives, all of them with that look. The one that said, "How dare you make a scene," even though I hadn't made a single one yet. And then Aunt Linda spoke, and the whole night changed. She didn't start with a scream. That would have been too easy, too obvious. Aunt Linda was more of a slow-boil kind of tyrant. The kind that smiled with her teeth but not her eyes. She walked in with her perfectly manicured hands folded in front of her clutch bag and said, in a voice like butter left out too long, "There you are." I didn't say anything, just stood between her and Emily. "This is where you've been?" she asked, turning to Emily. "Sneaking off in the middle of your own party to this?" Her eyes flicked around the room, taking in the handwritten banners, the tablecloths I'd ironed, the Polaroids of Emily riding a tricycle or dressed as a carrot for Halloween. The pictures made her pause, just for a second. Then she snapped back into her role. "You had guests waiting, Emily. Important people. Sponsors from your gym. That photographer from Voyage Weekly was there." "I didn't invite them," Emily said, softly. "You did. And what were they supposed to think when the birthday girl disappeared?" Emily looked down. I could feel her shrinking beside me. I stepped forward before she could apologize for her own birthday. "She didn't disappear," I said. "She just came to the party she actually wanted." That cracked the mask a bit. Aunt Linda's jaw clenched. "Excuse me. This," I gestured around the room, "was the plan all along." Emily told me what she wanted. She didn't want to be a product launch. She wanted a birthday. From behind her, Uncle James muttered, "Ryan, not the time, no," I said. "It's the exact time." That's when she dropped the smile. "You self-righteous little," Aunt Linda caught herself. Lowered her voice again. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I had vendors, Ryan. Contracts. RSVPs. There was a sushi bar. A live string quartet. I had to refund deposits. She didn't want a sushi bar, I shot back. She wanted a chocolate cake with pink frosting and pictures of her with her cat. That's it. That's what she asked for. But you weren't listening. I could see my mom in the back, wide-eyed, clutching her purse like it might fly away. A few cousins stood awkwardly near the door. One of them had started filming. Of course. Emily stepped forward. "I told you I didn't want a big thing, Mom." Aunt Linda turned on her. "You said that, but you didn't mean it. You're shy. You don't know what's best for you sometimes, and that's okay. That's why I make the decisions." "You make the decisions for yourself," Emily said. Her voice cracked, but she didn't step back. "You wanted that party. You wanted the photographer. You wanted everyone to see the perfect version of me." The silence that followed hit like a slap. Aunt Linda looked like she'd been gut-punched but was trying to hold it together. She took a shaky breath and turned to me again. "You've been jealous of this family since you were a teenager. You just couldn't stand to see us do something right." There it was. I wanted to say a million things. That I wasn't jealous, I was exhausted. That I'd been dismissed and mocked and treated like a cautionary tale at every Thanksgiving table since I was old enough to stop believing that college would magically fix everything. That I had spent my own money and time and heart making something real for Emily, not because I wanted attention, but because she deserved it. But instead, I looked at Emily. She looked back at me. And then she turned to the room full of family, still half-shadowed in the doorway. "I'm staying here," she said. "You are not," Aunt Linda snapped. "We have a schedule." "No. You do," Emily said. Her voice had strength now. "I'm 18. Remember? Adult and everything? You told everyone." You posted it online with 3 exclamation points. My mom gasped. Someone stifled a laugh. Aunt Linda stepped toward her, but Emily moved to my side. And that was the moment. The click of a lock. The line in the sand. I felt it in my chest, that tingle you get when the underdog starts to push back. I tried to let you have your way, Emily continued. I wore the dress. I smiled. I played nice. But you still found a way to make my birthday about you. So yeah, I left. And honestly, it feels like the first time in years that I got to breathe. Aunt Linda froze. She was shaking, not with sadness, but with fury. The kind of fury that comes from not being able to control the narrative. You think this is freedom, she hissed. This is delusion. You're throwing away everything I built for you. Everything I sacrificed. For what? For him. She pointed at me like I was roadkill. Ryan listened, Emily said simply. That's more than I can say for anyone else. It was quiet again. Thick, sticky quiet. You could almost hear the string lights buzzing above us. Then Aunt Linda laughed. A short, sharp bark. You're going to regret this. Both of you. She turned and stormed out. A few relatives followed her. Others stayed frozen, unsure which team to be on. My mom lingered for a moment longer, then sighed and left with a shake of her head, muttering something about family drama under her breath. And then it was just us again. Me, Emily, and a room full of real, raw, imperfect memories. She sat down beside me and took a forkful of cake. She's going to come for you hard, you know that? I nodded. You ready for that? I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I actually felt like maybe I was. I am now. But I had no idea just how far Aunt Linda was willing to go to make sure I regretted every second of it. Emily didn't stay long after that. Maybe half an hour. Long enough for us to finish a couple slices of cake, play her favorite indie song on the speakers, and light the tiny sparkler candles I'd tucked away just in case. She filmed it, her blowing them out, laughing with frosting on her nose, and posted it on her story with a caption that simply said, "Real party." No filter. No stage poses. Just her, sitting cross-legged on the floor in mismatched socks and a hoodie she borrowed from my trunk. After she left, the venue felt too quiet. I cleaned up slowly, taking down the Polaroids one by one, sliding them back into the envelope. My phone was blowing up again, but I ignored it. I knew there'd be fallout, but I didn't expect it to start quite as fast or as public as it did. By the time I got home, my inbox was full. Emails, DMs, tagged posts. A Facebook message from my cousin Jake. Dude, you're all over next door. Turns out, Aunt Linda wasn't going to let the evening fade quietly. She'd gone scorched earth, posted a long, furious rant on her public social media about how I had kidnapped her daughter on her birthday, sabotaged a professional event, and emotionally manipulated a young girl during a vulnerable time. She painted me as a bitter, unstable black sheep who isolated Emily from her family and weaponized nostalgia to turn her against her own mother. Her post had pictures from the banquet hall, empty chairs, untouched food, her standing next to the DJ looking distraught. It got hundreds of reactions and shares. A few local parents who knew her chimed in with sympathy. One person wrote, "What a tragedy. I'd be devastated if someone did that to my daughter." She'd even tagged my work profile, claiming I was unfit to manage community tech projects due to repeated emotional instability. That one stung. My freelance gigs were small, sure, but I worked hard to build trust with clients. That kind of reputation, once cracked, spreads fast. I read the post twice, then again, and again. Each time, my chest got tighter. It wasn't just that she was lying. It was how easy it came to her. How she could twist reality so thoroughly and make herself the victim. For a second, I considered letting it go. Just riding the wave. Eventually, people would forget, right? But then I got a text from Emily. She went through my room, took my phone, my laptop, everything. Grounded me. Said I'm not emotionally stable enough to make my own decisions. And a second later, she's trying to get me pulled from my gym program until I straighten out. That's when the guilt punched me in the gut. This wasn't just about me anymore. She was punishing Emily now for thinking for herself. The next morning, I woke up to more messages. My mom, of all people, had shared Aunt Linda's post with a passive-aggressive comment. I always said Ryan needed help. My uncle had liked it. A few of my cousins commented vague things like, "So sad when family turns on each other." No one had asked me what actually happened. Except for one person, Sarah, one of Emily's old babysitters who used to be around a lot when we were younger. She messaged me, saw the post. "Doesn't sound like you. What's the real story?" I sent her the photos, the real ones, the cake, the decorations. Emily laughing, I soft and happy. Then I sent her the screenshots of Emily asking to come to my place, of her thanking me, of her saying she didn't want to be there. Sarah responded with one line, "Let me help." I didn't know what she meant at first, but 2 hours later, she posted a very different story on her page, public, tagged, and with receipts. She wrote about how Aunt Linda had always micromanaged Emily's life, how she used guilt and control disguised as concern, how she had once pulled Emily from a school play because the costume wasn't dignified, how she made everything about appearances, not people. Sarah even hinted at how Aunt Linda had tried to get her fired from her old babysitting job when she let Emily have pizza for dinner instead of grilled salmon. She included screenshots, messages Emily had sent her months ago venting about her mom, ones Sarah had saved when she started to worry. It blew up. People started commenting, asking questions. Then others joined in, an old coach, a retired teacher, even a neighbor. One by one, people shared stories, little things. But when you piled them up, they painted a very different picture. Aunt Linda tried to fight back, of course, claimed it was all fake. But the tide was turning. I wish I could say that was the end of it. But that was only the beginning. 2 days later, I got an email. Not from a family member. From a lawyer. Not mine. Hers. Apparently, Aunt Linda wasn't just mad now. She wanted to sue me. I didn't panic when I saw the lawyer's name in my inbox. I felt my stomach drop, sure, but after everything Aunt Linda had already thrown at me, this felt inevitable. She wasn't just trying to embarrass me anymore, she wanted to ruin me. And if I had learned anything from this, it was that people like her don't stop until they're forced to. The cease and desist letter was full of pomp. Legal fluff threatening defamation charges for publicly disparaging the character of a respected community figure and orchestrating an event designed to undermine parental authority. Her lawyer demanded I issue a public apology, take down anything referencing the party, and pay $5,000 in reputational damages. That's when something in me snapped. I'd spent years brushing things off, being the easygoing one, avoiding fights, letting people rewrite my story because it was easier than being the bad guy. But I looked at that letter and realized, for the first time, how much I'd let her shape my life, even in silence. So I fought back. I didn't hire a lawyer. I became one. Not literally, but close enough. I spent the next 48 hours reading everything I could about defamation law, especially in our state. I reached out to a friend of a friend, a paralegal who walked me through the basics. Then I crafted a letter of my own. Not petty, not emotional, just truthful, meticulous. I broke down every claim in her cease and desist and responded with receipts, screenshots, timestamps, and testimonies from people who had witnessed the night. I explained how her post had falsely accused me of criminal behavior, including kidnapping, which was both slanderous and actionable. I ended the letter by stating clearly, if she did not retract her public accusations and delete the post within 72 hours, I would be pursuing legal action for defamation, harassment, and damages to my professional reputation. I CC'd her lawyer and sent it through a certified email tracker. The post was gone the next morning. But I wasn't done. Because while she was busy playing queen on her crumbling throne, she hadn't realized how many people had turned against her. The local gym board, where she'd pulled strings to freeze Emily's membership, was flooded with complaints. Screenshots from Emily's messages. Public backlash. Even a quiet statement from Emily herself, shared in a private Facebook group for teen athletes, explaining how her mother had tried to shut her down for wanting one night to be herself. The board reinstated her. Unanimously. They also cut ties with Aunt Linda as a sponsor. Then came the photographer, the one from Voyage Weekly. Turns out, he hadn't appreciated being lied to either. He'd been told Emily would be walking into a staged, coming-of-age shoot, not ambushed at a fake party where she'd already made it clear she didn't want to be. He released a post of his own, nothing dramatic, just a polite clarification. Respecting a young woman's boundaries should always come before press coverage. Her social media influence? Shattered. Sponsors dropped. Friends distanced. People remembered all the little moments, the micromanaging, the guilt-tripping, the side comments, and started to see a pattern. But the real victory? That came a few weeks later, when Emily moved out. She had saved up quietly. A part-time job here, a few babysitting gigs there. With a little help from Sarah and a scholarship advisor, she secured a spot in a shared apartment near her college campus. She sent me a photo the day she moved in, her standing in a tiny kitchen, grinning beside a box of mismatched mugs. The caption? "Thanks for helping me get here." Aunt Linda tried to spin it. Said Emily had been brainwashed, that she was running away. But no one bought it anymore. The mask had cracked too wide. As for me, I didn't fade back into the background. I got new freelance gigs, bigger ones, thanks to people who admired how I stood up for myself. Some clients had seen the drama and actually respected how I handled it. Said it showed integrity. One even called me shockingly professional for a guy in jeans. Go figure. The best part? The next family gathering was at my cousin Jake's wedding. I walked in, head high. No whispers. No awkward glances. Aunt Linda didn't say a word. Just looked away, cheeks tight, as I hugged Emily and handed her a small framed copy of her sparkler birthday photo. We didn't need to say anything. She smiled, tucked it under her arm, and whispered, "You know she still thinks you ruined her party." I grinned. "I didn't ruin it," I said. "I saved the real one." And for once, I didn't feel like the family disappointment. I felt like the only one who finally did something right. I'm Jason, 31, and the black sheep of the family, or at least that's the role they've cast me in since I was old enough to have an opinion they didn't like. I'm not reckless or dramatic. I don't cause scenes or throw tantrums. I just don't play by the script they all agreed on behind closed doors. The one where my older brother Tyler is the golden child. My mom is the long-suffering matriarch, and I'm the disappointment who's too sensitive or doesn't understand how families work. I don't show up much anymore. After years of biting my tongue through backhanded compliments and whispered gossip, I started pulling away. At first, they acted offended. Then they stopped pretending. Family events came and went without a single invitation. Birthdays, holidays, even my own father's retirement party. I found out about all of them after the fact, through blurry photos on Facebook or group chats I was never part of. I didn't complain. I learned to live around the silence. I made my own life outside of them. I built a small business from the ground up, one no one in my family has ever asked about. I dated quietly, kept my wins private, and swallowed the bitterness that tried to rise every time I saw my last name in a caption that didn't include me. So when I got a text from Tyler saying, "Engagement dinner this Friday. You can come if you want," I stared at my phone for a good 10 minutes. Not, "We'd love to see you," or even a proper invitation. Just that. A throwaway line like he was doing me a favor. I almost deleted it. But something in me, call it curiosity, maybe even masochism, wanted to see how deep the rot had spread. I RSVP'd with a thumbs up. The dinner was at some overpriced steakhouse downtown. The kind with dark wood walls and wine menus thicker than their actual menus. I showed up right on time, dressed decently in a navy blazer and slacks, nothing flashy. I even brought a small gift, nothing extravagant, just a nice bottle of champagne and a card. Thought it might break the ice, or at least smooth over the awkwardness I knew was waiting for me inside. The hostess led me to a private room near the back. I could hear the laughter before I saw them. My mother's sharp, performative laugh. My uncle's hoarse cackle. The polite chuckle of strangers trying to fit in. When I walked in, the noise died just slightly, just enough for me to feel it. Tyler stood at the center, one hand on the small of his fiancée's back. Her name is Brooke. She's tall, blonde, the kind of woman who looks like she rehearses her Instagram poses in front of the mirror every morning. She looked me up and down like I was an unpaid intern who just wandered into the boardroom by accident. "Jason," she said, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Wow, you made it." Tyler clapped me on the back like I was a distant cousin who just flew in from abroad. "Didn't think you'd show, man." "Yeah," I said, setting the champagne on the table beside a stack of expensive-looking party favors. "Wouldn't miss it." Brooke leaned closer to him, loud enough for the table to hear. "We're keeping the guest list small for the actual wedding. No plus ones, especially for people like, you know." Her eyes flicked to me, then away like I wasn't worth finishing the sentence for. My stomach tightened, but I just smiled. I didn't flinch. I'd learned long ago that any reaction, even hurt, was just fuel for them. My mother raised her glass. "Let's just be grateful he even invited you at all. It's so nice to see you around again, sweetie. We were starting to forget what you looked like." The table laughed. A few of the strangers shifted uncomfortably, but no one said anything. My Uncle Ray chimed in, already on his third scotch. "Hey, maybe you can park cars at the wedding. That way, you'll be useful and still technically there." More laughter. Brooke giggled like he'd just performed a tight five at a comedy club. I sat down slowly, setting my folder on the empty seat beside me. Nice to see you too, Uncle Ray. I didn't say much through the appetizers. I let them talk over me, around me. I nodded politely at their fake smiles and exaggerated stories. I watched my mom gush over Brooke like she'd found the daughter she always wanted. Watched my brother beam like this was the culmination of every expectation they'd ever pinned on him. I let them have their fantasy for a little longer. I needed to make sure I hadn't overestimated just how entitled they'd become. About halfway through dinner, Brooke started explaining their wedding plans to the table. It's going to be at the Palisade Estate in May. Very intimate. Only 50 people. We're keeping it elegant, exclusive. Just close friends and family. Very expensive, my mom added, sipping her wine like it was holy water. But it's worth it for Tyler. He deserves the best. Ray grunted. Bet that venue costs more than my house. Brooke laughed. Oh, it's completely covered. Tyler's sponsor has it all taken care of. One of his clients. Super generous. I raised an eyebrow. A sponsor? Tyler shot me a warning look, like I was treading on sacred ground. Yeah, a friend who believes in our future. Huh, I said, and tapped my folder lightly. Brooke glanced at it, then back at me. What's that? Nothing important, I said. Just some boring paperwork. You know, sponsor stuff. There was a slight flicker of confusion in her eyes, but she waved it off. By dessert, the jokes were turning meaner. Someone joked about my old car. Someone else brought up the time I dropped out of grad school after Dad refused to co-sign the loan. Brooke laughed a little too hard when someone asked if I was still working at that little company. Tyler didn't defend me once. My mom acted like she couldn't hear anything mean being said, even when it was her saying it. I waited until the laughter reached its loudest point, until their comfort was so thick you could taste it. Then I opened the folder. Cool, I said, not raising my voice, just loud enough to cut through the noise. Then I'll let the venue know you don't need my sponsorship anymore. The laughter died instantly. I flipped the folder open and laid it on the table. Inside was a signed letter of agreement, a receipt of a $12,500 down payment made in my name, and a scheduled payment plan for the remaining balance of the Palisade estate. My company logo was on the top of the page. I'm sure they'll understand, I added casually. The cancellation fees only, what, 40%? Shouldn't be a problem for you guys. I mean, you've got it all covered, right? My brother stared at the papers like they were in a different language. Brooke's face had gone pale. My mother's jaw clenched, the way it always did when control slipped through her fingers. What is this? Brooke asked, her voice tight. That friend who sponsored the venue? I said, leaning back. That was me. I just didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I thought it'd be nice to support family. No one spoke. I figured since I wasn't bringing a +1, I added with a smile, I could at least bring something else to the table. Tyler finally found his voice. You said you didn't want to be involved. I said I wasn't sure I'd be invited. But you were so generous to let me come tonight. I paused. And now that I've seen how welcome I really am, I'm thinking, maybe it's best if I step away from the whole thing. And then I stood up, slowly, deliberately, as the tension in the room rose like a tide about to crash. That's when Brooke grabbed the papers. That's when my mother stood up too, eyes flashing. And that's when Tyler said something that changed everything. Tyler slammed his hand on the table, hard enough that the wine glasses clinked and a few people jumped. Jason, don't be dramatic, he snapped. You're really gonna pull this? Over a joke? I looked at him, genuinely curious. A joke? You think that's what tonight was? Brooke tossed the folder back onto the table like it was dirty. You're seriously going to sabotage our wedding just because you're bitter you're not part of the inner circle? I tilted my head slightly. You mean the circle that laughs at me, insults me, and treats me like a stray dog someone felt bad for? That circle. My mother finally spoke, her voice low and sharp. This is exactly why we don't invite you to things, Jason. You always make everything about yourself. That one hit me. Not because it was true, but because it was so incredibly predictable. The same playbook every time. I wasn't supposed to react. I was supposed to take the hit, smile, and come back for more. When I didn't, I was the villain. I kept my voice calm. You invited me here to be your punching bag. You just didn't think I'd swing back. My uncle let out a dry laugh. He thinks he's a big shot now just cause he put down a deposit. Brooke leaned forward, her tone icy. You want a thank you card, Jason? Is that it? Because if you're doing all this for attention, I'm not, I cut in. Trust me, Brooke, I don't need your attention. Or your approval. I turned to Tyler. But you? You're my brother. You didn't even tell me you were getting married until after everyone else knew. And then you invite me last minute like I'm an afterthought. Tyler's expression softened for half a second, then hardened again. I didn't think you'd care. That hurt more than I expected. Yeah, I said quietly. That's the problem, isn't it? There was a heavy silence. One of the waiters peeked into the room, sensed the tension, and quickly backed out. A few of the other guests, people I didn't even know, looked like they wanted to melt into their seats. They had been enjoying the show up until now. Now it was getting real. Brooke glanced at my mother, who gave her a slight nod, some kind of unspoken signal that told me they'd been on the same wavelength for months, maybe longer. Brooke folded her arms. Fine. You want us to beg? Not happening. You made your point. You're not part of this family. You never have been. And Tyler doesn't need your money to get married. Good, I said, standing tall. Because he's not getting it. My mom scoffed. You really think we can't find another venue? That will cancel the whole wedding over this. I don't think you'll cancel it, I said. But you won't find a place like the Palisade with less than 4 months to go. Not during wedding season. And even if you do, you'll be starting from scratch. New vendors, new permits, new deposits. You'll spend triple what I put down just trying to match it. My uncle opened his mouth to argue, then slowly closed it. Tyler looked like he wanted to fight me. His fists were clenched at his sides, jaw tight. But he knew I was right. I didn't do this to ruin your wedding, I said. I did it because, for once, I thought I could be part of something. Because I wanted to believe that maybe things had changed. No one said a word. Not even Brooke, whose perfect posture was starting to crack under the pressure. I nodded once, slowly, then gathered the folder from the table and tucked it back into my bag. I'll send the venue a cancellation notice tomorrow, I said as I turned to leave. Good luck finding a replacement. Oh, and you might want to warn your vendors. A lot of them were booked through my connections. That was the last thing I said before I walked out. I didn't look back. Not when I heard my uncle mutter, "What just happened?" Not when Brooke hissed something under her breath. Not even when I caught the faint sound of my mother calling my name, sharp and furious, like I'd stolen something that was rightfully hers. Outside, the night air was cool, a sharp contrast to the stuffy tension I'd just escaped. I stood under the awning for a minute, breathing it in. My hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from the weight of years finally settling into place. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. I felt free, and a little hollow, like the part of me that had always hoped they'd change had finally given up. I turned my phone off as I walked to my car. I already knew there would be texts, maybe even voicemails. Apologies, insults, bargaining attempts, maybe all three in the same message. But I wasn't ready to hear any of them. Not yet. Because what they didn't know was this wasn't the only leverage I had. They thought I'd just cancel the venue and disappear again. But I'd seen enough tonight to know that it was time for more than just walking away. It was time to make sure they remembered exactly who they had underestimated. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I parked in a quiet lot by the waterfront and sat with the engine off, windows down, just listening to the water lap against the dock. It was late, almost midnight, but I didn't feel tired. I felt wired, like I had swallowed an electric current. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel while my mind raced through every moment of that dinner. Every smug comment, every fake smile, every time my mother glanced at me like I was something she had to explain away. I hadn't planned on pulling the plug tonight. That folder in my bag had been a quiet threat, a last resort, just in case things went south. But I should have known. Deep down, I'd expected it. I'd practically scripted their lines in my head. Still, hearing them say it out loud, Brooke's little jab about people like you, my mom raising her glass like I was some charity case they'd decided to tolerate for an evening, it was worse than I'd imagined. Not because it was new, but because it wasn't. It was the same script, same roles, same applause. Except now, I was done playing mine. I unlocked my phone and opened my email. I already had the venue manager's contact pulled up. I'd met her personally when I'd arranged the deposit. Nice woman, extremely competent, and a little too eager to work with someone who had real money. I didn't send the cancellation yet. Not tonight. I wasn't doing this in a haze of emotion. I wanted to think. Instead, I opened a different folder, one I'd labeled contingencies 6 weeks ago, just after Tyler sent that lukewarm text inviting me to the engagement dinner. I'm not petty by default, but I am prepared. This folder had everything. Vendor contracts, The original design mock-ups for the invitations, Brooke had gushed about them on Instagram. A contact list of her bridesmaids, many of whom had never even met me. And, more importantly, a spreadsheet, color-coded, meticulously detailed, outlining the entire financial scaffolding of their wedding. Because what none of them knew was that the venue wasn't the only thing I had covered. Brooke had gone shopping with my mother back in January. She had posted about it, proudly showcasing her dream dress on a mannequin at a boutique downtown. That dress had been part of a package I quietly funded under a business associate's name. It was easy enough. I knew someone who owed me a favor, someone who ran a private bridal financing group. Brooke's dress? Paid for. Her alterations, veil, and accessories? Also covered, but not in her name. Same with the catering deposit, run through a corporate shell account tied to my consulting firm. The string holding their wedding together? That was me. Invisible, but everywhere. Because I knew my family. And I knew they'd smile to my face while sharpening their knives behind my back. I wasn't going to destroy anything out of spite. I wasn't going to ruin their day just to watch them suffer. But I was going to take back control. I leaned back against the seat and stared at the stars over the water. Somewhere in the distance, a horn sounded, low and mournful. They thought I was weak because I walked away. They never imagined I'd come back with receipts. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. 32 unread messages by the time I rolled out of bed and made coffee. Tyler, of course, was first. Then Mom. Then, surprisingly, Brooke. Her message was short and acidic. You need to call me. Now. I didn't reply. Instead, I got dressed, put on a crisp white button-up, and drove to the Palisade estate. The manager, Clarissa, greeted me with a warm smile and a hint of concern. Mr. Ellison, is everything all right? I nodded. Just need to update a few things in the contract. She led me to her office, where I laid out my plan. Simple, polite, entirely professional. I wasn't canceling the wedding. Not yet. I was altering the contract. Removing the current booking under Tyler and Brooke's name and transferring everything. Every responsibility, every vendor, under mine. Clarissa blinked. You're taking ownership of the event? Exactly. And the guest list. We'll be updating that as well. Soon. She didn't ask questions. Just typed briskly, clicked a few boxes, and printed the revised agreement. As I signed, she asked, should I let the couple know of the changes? I looked her in the eye and said calmly, no, I'll handle that myself. I walked out of the estate with the sun shining on my back, the wind crisp and cool. That afternoon, I sat down at my computer and started crafting the invitations. Not the ones they had planned. Mine. New location details, slightly altered wording, and a few notable omissions. Several names were absent from the list. Names of people who had spent years making me feel small in rooms they thought they owned. Instead, I included a handful of others. Old friends. My father's former colleague who used to treat me like a son. My godmother, who hadn't been invited at all. A couple of Tyler's childhood friends who had reached out to me quietly over the years to say they missed me, that the family had gone too far. The new list wasn't vengeful. It was just honest. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was just rewriting the script. And they didn't know it yet, but the opening scene of their wedding was going to look very, very different. Especially when they found out who'd be walking Brooke down the aisle. I didn't wait long. 2 days after I assumed control of the venue and updated the guest list, I sent a short, carefully worded email to Brooke and Tyler. Hi. Per our previous arrangement, please note that the venue contract has been updated. Further details will be available at the appropriate time. I've also taken the liberty of revising the guest list to reflect those with a genuine connection to the event. If you'd like to discuss next steps, I'm available Friday morning at the Palisade estate. Best, Jason. Tyler called within 10 minutes. I let it go to voicemail. He tried again. And again. Finally, I picked up on the 4th attempt. What are you doing, Jason? He barked the second I answered. Hi to you too, I said calmly. I trust you saw the email. You're not serious. You can't just take over our wedding like this. That's not how this works. It is, I said, when your wedding is sitting on contracts I signed, deposits I made, and vendors I vetted. You all made it very clear I wasn't really invited to be a part of your lives. So now, I'm simply following your lead. You'll still get married. I'll make sure of it. Just not quite the way you imagined. You're ruining everything. No, Tyler. I'm correcting everything. Brooke called next. I didn't answer. She left a message, her voice high and shaky, trying to sound composed but just barely holding it together. Jason, this isn't funny. This is our wedding. You don't get to control that. You're just doing this to get back at us. Grow up. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Everything was already in motion. Friday morning, I arrived at the Palisade estate early. Clarissa had everything ready: revised contracts, updated vendor lists, and a fresh calendar of deliverables. She had also pulled up the finalized floor plan, which I tweaked slightly, shifting the head table, adjusting the reserved seating, and making sure a few names were removed entirely. Then I waited. Tyler and Brooke walked in 15 minutes late, storming through the front doors with matching scowls and an air of forced confidence. Jason, Brooke said, crossing her arms. This stops now. Tyler looked around. Where's the manager? We want to speak to her. She's busy, I said. With me. Have a seat. They didn't. They stood, looming like they were about to lecture a wayward employee. All right, I said, opening a folder. Here's how this is going to work. You're getting married here, as scheduled. The date remains. Most of the vendors remain. The ceremony will be beautiful, intimate, classy, just not performative. Brooke blinked. What does that mean? It means your influencer photographer is out, replaced by a proper wedding photographer who focuses on people, not Instagram trends. It means your ice sculpture idea? Gone. The custom cocktail menu named after your dogs? Also gone. This wedding isn't a branding exercise. It's a celebration. For family. Real family. Tyler finally snapped. This is insane. You don't get to just. I held up a hand. I do. And I have. But I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to make you an offer. Brooke narrowed her eyes. What kind of offer? I looked at them both, steady and calm. I'll keep the wedding intact. I'll pay every remaining balance. I'll make sure it runs smoothly. You'll have your moment. But there are conditions. Tyler snorted. Of course there are. 1. You acknowledge, publicly, during the reception, the people who made this wedding happen. Not just me, but the others you conveniently left out. Dad's former partner, who co-signed your business loan. Aunt Susan, who paid your rent for 6 months. The people you forgot when it was time to give thanks. Brooke opened her mouth, but I continued. 2. My guest list remains. I've invited people who matter to our family. People you cut out because they didn't fit your aesthetic. You mean like your weird godmother with the birds? Brooke said. I didn't flinch. Yes, her. And your high school friend Jen, who you ghosted after she got married at a courthouse. They're coming. They belong here more than half the people you had on your original list. Tyler stepped forward. And if we say no? I smiled. Then the wedding's canceled. Every vendor gets notified. Every dollar refunded. Except for the cancellation fees, which you'll owe. The dress gets repossessed. The catering vanishes. And good luck finding another venue this late in the season. You'll spend double what I spent and still end up with a garden party in someone's backyard. They stared at me. For a long time. Then Brooke hissed. This is blackmail. No, I said. This is a choice. Tyler was the first to break. He looked tired. Really tired. Like the weight of everything had finally settled on him. Fine, he muttered. We'll do it. Brooke glared at him. Tyler. He turned to her. We don't have a choice. She looked like she wanted to scream, but she swallowed it. She didn't want to be embarrassed. Not now. Not yet. Good, I said, standing. We'll finalize the program next week. The day of the wedding was perfect. Warm sunlight filtered through the trees, and the Palisade estate looked like something out of a movie. Guests arrived on time. The ceremony ran smoothly. The food was excellent. People smiled, laughed, took pictures under twinkling lights. And the guest list? Oh, it was glorious. My godmother hugged me with tears in her eyes. Jen arrived with her husband, who Tyler awkwardly pretended to remember. A retired teacher from our childhood, who had once helped me through a rough patch, was seated front and center. I watched Brooke try to smile through it all, clearly confused by half the people in the room and too proud to admit it. But the real moment came during the reception speeches. Tyler stood up, champagne in hand, and cleared his throat. I'd like to thank everyone for coming, he began, voice tight. And I'd like to thank my wife, Brooke, for making this day so special. But before we toast, there's someone else I need to acknowledge. He turned to me. I've made mistakes. We both have. And this wedding, this day, wouldn't have happened without Jason. Not just because of what he gave us, but because of who he is. Someone who stood by us even when we didn't deserve it. Someone who reminded me what family's supposed to be. He raised his glass. To Jason. Everyone clapped. Brooke clapped too. It was stiff, but she did it. And for the first time in years, I felt seen. After the wedding, my mother approached me. She didn't say much, just, "You didn't have to do all that." I looked her in the eye. But I did. Because I finally realized something, Mom. What's that? I don't need your approval. Or your invitation. I know who I am now. And I'm done begging to be part of a family that only wants me when I'm useful. She blinked. Are you cutting us off? I shook my head. No. I'm just stepping out of the role you wrote for me. Then I walked away. Weeks passed. Tyler sent me a thank you note. It was short, but handwritten. Brooke posted about the wedding online, filtered and polished, of course, but in the captions, she tagged me. She even followed me. I didn't follow back. And my business? It boomed. Turns out, a few of the guests were impressed by how the event turned out. I landed 2 new clients before dessert had even been cleared. But more than that, I finally felt free. Not in the dramatic, burn it all down way, but in the quiet, powerful way of knowing I was no longer playing a part in someone else's story. I had written my own chapter, and this time, they had no choice but to read it. I was 26 when it happened. The kind of moment that doesn't just sting for a few days, but plants itself so deep in your memory that years later, your stomach still knots up just thinking about it. My name's Connor, and if I had to explain my family dynamic in a single sentence, I'd probably say, picture a sitcom where everyone laughs, except the punchlines are real people, and one of them is always me. Growing up, I was the youngest of 3. My brother, Josh, is 5 years older and the golden boy of the family, varsity everything, straight into dad's company after college, married his high school sweetheart, had 2 kids by 28. My sister, Lily, was the free spirit turned Instagram influencer before that was even a real job. And me? I was the oops. The surprise baby. The one my parents weren't planning on and never really adjusted for. I heard whispers growing up. They weren't trying for a third. You know, they almost didn't keep him. It was never said directly to me, until it was. Despite all that, I tried. I tried to be the quiet peacemaker, the one who stayed out of trouble, got decent grades, went to college, didn't rock the boat. I thought if I just stayed in my lane long enough, I'd earn a little respect, maybe even a sliver of pride. But in our house, love was a currency, and I was always overdrawn. The lead up to the reunion started about 6 months earlier. My mom sent a group email with the subject line, "Big Family Reunion." All caps because this is important. That was her thing. Exclamation points and guilt trips. The message went on about how it had been years since everyone had been in one place, how they'd rented a big cabin in the mountains, how even Aunt Marie was flying in from Arizona with her 6-pound dog that barked like a dying alarm clock. At the time, I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Chicago, working as a data analyst at a mid-sized firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable, quiet. I didn't reply to the email right away. I wasn't sure I wanted to go. The last family get-together I'd attended ended with my uncle saying, "Connor, you still don't have a girlfriend? Maybe you're just one of those, you know." And then he trailed off while nodding in a vaguely offensive direction. Everyone laughed. I didn't, but I went anyway. Guilt's a powerful thing, especially when you're the one everyone thinks has something to prove. The cabin was massive. 3 stories, wood-paneled everything, fake bear rugs, the whole rustic fantasy. I pulled up in my used Honda Civic and parked between Josh's brand new Escalade and Lily's leased Tesla. There were already about 20 people inside, and more were showing up by the hour. Hugs, loud voices, the occasional shriek of, "Oh my God, you've gotten so tall," as if I'd grown 3 inches in the last decade. I was tired. I'd worked late the night before, then caught a 4 a.m. flight with a layover in Detroit. I wasn't in the mood for small talk, but I smiled and nodded and played my role. I helped carry in coolers and set up chairs. I grilled burgers when the designated grill master bailed to watch football. I even took my little cousins on a hike when they got bored and started throwing rocks at the squirrel feeder. I did what I always did. I made myself useful. The reunion hit peak chaos on Saturday night. That's when the official dinner took place. 50-plus people packed into the backyard, long plastic tables covered in mismatched tablecloths, disposable plates stacked a foot high, kids running around with juice boxes, and the adults slowly getting tipsy on boxed wine and light beer. My mom was in her element. She wore a floral apron she didn't need and played hostess like we were being filmed for some low-budget Hallmark special. She kept announcing things like, "This is what family looks like, and isn't this perfect?" every 15 minutes, like she was trying to convince herself it was true. That's when my dad decided it was time for speeches. He'd had a few drinks, his cheeks were red, and he was swaying just a little. He stood on a wooden bench and clinked his glass with a fork. All right, he said, voice booming over the laughter. "Can I get everyone's attention for a minute?" People quieted down. Phones came out. Cameras pointed. My brother looked smug. My sister flipped her hair and struck a pose. I stood off to the side, sipping my soda, thinking maybe this would be one of those harmless dad speeches about memories and how time flies. You know, the kind of thing that ends with everyone hugging and pretending they're not secretly judging each other. But no. Instead, my dad looked around, then stretched one arm behind my back and pulled me forward like he was about to give me an award. "And this guy," he said with a loud chuckle, "this guy right here." I smiled awkwardly. He kept going. "This one's our family miracle," he said. Well, more like a mishap that turned out all right in the end. Laughter rippled across the crowd. Some of it was polite. Some of it wasn't. He grinned. Yup, the mistake we kept. But hey, he didn't end up in jail or anything, so that's a win, right? More laughter. This time louder. My uncle nearly spit out his drink. My aunt clapped. Even my brother snorted into his glass. Only a few people looked uncomfortable. My cousin just glanced at me and mouthed, "I'm so sorry," but she didn't say it out loud. I didn't laugh. I didn't say anything. I just stepped away, slowly, and walked back into the house. No one followed me. I don't think they even noticed I was gone. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the guest bed and stared at the wall for a long time. I could still hear them laughing through the windows. I wasn't angry. Not yet. It was something else, something heavier. It felt like being 12 again, overhearing my parents argue about money and hearing my dad say, "Well, if we didn't have to pay for Connor's stuff." It felt like realizing, again, that I was the footnote in a family that always had a headline. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't pack anything but the essentials. I got in my car, turned off my phone, and drove. I didn't even tell my boss I wouldn't be in on Monday. I just left. I crossed 2 state lines before I even looked at a map. I ended up in Portland, Oregon, of all places. I'd never been before. I just picked a spot where no one would think to find me. I got a new phone, new job, new apartment, no social media. I didn't tell anyone where I went. I didn't answer the emails. I didn't respond to the texts that came in later, most of them just saying, "Where'd you go?" as if they didn't know exactly why. And for a while, it worked. I built a life out there. Small, quiet, peaceful. I joined a climbing gym. I got into photography. I made friends who didn't know anything about my family or my past. I even started dating someone. Really dating, not just the occasional awkward coffee. I felt like I was breathing fresh air for the first time in years. Until 2 years later, when I walked out of my apartment and saw a man sitting on the hood of a rented car across the street. Middle-aged, business casual, holding a folder. I didn't know him, but I recognized the look. Private investigator. And just like that, the past was clawing its way back into my life. He didn't approach me at first. The man across the street just sat there, legs crossed, a leather folder resting on his lap like a schoolteacher's grading book. His car was unremarkable, gray mid-size sedan, Oregon plates, probably a rental from the airport. At first, I assumed he was just someone waiting on an Uber or killing time before a meeting. But then he looked directly at me and gave a nod that wasn't unfriendly, but wasn't casual either. A practiced nod. The kind that said, "I know who you are." I turned around and walked back inside. Locked the door. Then I went to the window, pulled the blinds just enough to peek, and watched him still sitting there, still watching me. And just like that, my 2 years of peace evaporated. I didn't answer the door when he knocked later that day. I didn't respond when he slid a manila envelope under the door with a note that read, "Connor, your family just wants to talk. Please read." I didn't even open it. I threw it into the trash, took the trash out, and walked 3 blocks just to throw it into a different dumpster. The next morning, he was gone. But the letter, whatever it was, had done its job. The door was cracked now, and memories were pouring in like rain through a broken seal. I started checking my email again. My old account. The one I'd stopped using after I disappeared. Hundreds of messages, most unread. I didn't open them. Just seeing the subject lines was enough. Are you okay? Please come back. Your cousin's wedding is in June. We're worried. But one subject line made me stop scrolling. Dad had a stroke. I hovered over it for a long time. I didn't open it right away. Just stared at the preview line that read, "He's okay now, but it was serious and he keeps asking about you." That night, I didn't sleep. I kept going back and forth in my mind. I'd made my escape. I'd rebuilt. But what if I'd gone too far? What if walking away without a word wasn't strength, but cowardice? The next morning, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I declined the call. It rang again 30 seconds later. Same number. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text came through. "Connor, it's Lily. Please talk to me. I'm not like them." I stood there for a full 5 minutes, staring at the screen. Then I turned my phone off, threw it into the drawer, and went to work like everything was fine. It wasn't. A week passed. Then 2. I kept getting calls from unknown numbers. I blocked them one by one. Then emails started coming in on my new account. Work email. My photography portfolio inbox. Somehow they were finding cracks. Slipping through. The private investigator must have found more than just my address. I felt like I was being watched in every room I entered, even though no one was there. I stopped going to the climbing gym. Stopped going out at all, really. It was like the walls of my new life were growing thinner by the day. And then, about a month later, Lily showed up. She was standing outside my building when I left for work, wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a to-go coffee like she was in some paparazzi video. I froze. She smiled. "Hey, stranger," she said softly. I didn't smile back. "How the hell did you find me?" She held up her phone. "I didn't. James did. He's persistent. Hired someone. I didn't ask to be found." She nodded. "I know. But can we talk?" I didn't want to, but I was too stunned to say no. We ended up sitting in the small coffee shop 2 blocks down, across from each other in a booth near the window. She looked different. Tired, maybe. Or older. But not fake happy like she usually was at family gatherings. "I just wanted to see you," she said. "You didn't even say goodbye. Didn't think I needed to." "That's not fair." "Neither was calling me a mistake in front of 50 people. I snapped. She looked down. I didn't laugh. "Doesn't matter." There was a long silence. She sipped her coffee. I didn't touch mine. "Dad's sick," she said eventually. "He's not doing great. The stroke hit harder than we thought. He's not himself." I didn't say anything. "He talks about you," she continued. "Keeps asking where you went. Says he didn't mean what he said." I laughed bitterly. He meant it. He just didn't mean to say it out loud. "Maybe. But Connor, we're family." I pushed back from the table. "No, we're relatives. That's not the same thing." She didn't follow me when I walked out. But 3 days later, I got a certified letter in the mail from my parents' lawyer. It said I was being named in something called a Conditional Family Trust Restructure Agreement. I had no idea what that meant, but it mentioned my father's health, his business holdings, and a request for a face-to-face discussion of inheritance restructuring in light of recent events. I ignored it. 2 weeks after that, Josh showed up. This time, I didn't even let him get a word in. I saw him walking up the stairs to my building, opened my window, and yelled, "Leave. Now." He looked up, smug as ever. "Come on, man. Don't be a child. You don't get to call me that. I didn't fly across the country to play games. You never flew across the country for me before. Why start now?" He shrugged. "Dad wants to make things right. Tell him he should have done that before he humiliated me." Josh laughed. "You're seriously still hung up on that? Dude, you've always been sensitive." The words hit like a slap. "You've always been sensitive." That was the phrase I'd heard my whole life. Anytime I tried to stand up for myself, anytime I pushed back, it wasn't that they were being cruel. It was that I was too weak to take a joke. I slammed the window shut and walked away. That night, someone broke into my car. They didn't steal anything. Nothing was missing, but everything had been gone through. Glove box open. Trunk emptied. Seat pushed all the way back. Like someone was looking for something. I filed a report, changed the locks on my apartment, and installed a security camera. I couldn't prove it was them, but I didn't need to. The next letter that arrived was from my dad. Handwritten. Shaky. He apologized. Kind of. Said he missed me. That he didn't want to die with bad blood between us. That he wanted me to come home. Just for a visit. Just to talk. There was a check enclosed. $10,000. I didn't cash it. I didn't even touch it. I stared at it for a while, then ripped it in half. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This one wasn't from my dad. It was from Josh. And this time, it wasn't sentimental. It was business. If you don't come home soon, he wrote, the company and the estate will pass fully to me. You will be left out of the new documents. We try to give you a chance. Don't expect another one. I stared at the words for a long time. It wasn't about family anymore. It was about power, about control, about ownership, and they were dangling it over my head like a bone in front of a dog. But what they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that I didn't want the money. I never had. What I did want was respect, autonomy, peace. But now they were threatening that, too. And that changed everything. Because if they wanted to make this a game, I'd play. Quietly. Strategically. And I'd make sure that when I made my next move, it would be one they'd never forget. I hit my lowest point not long after Josh's letter arrived. It wasn't just the threat of being cut out of the family fortune or the underhanded way they were trying to reel me back in. It was the realization that even after 2 years of silence, 2 years of building something of my own, I was still orbiting their dysfunction like some forgotten satellite, pulled back into their gravity the second they wanted something. And they always wanted something. For a while, I didn't leave my apartment unless I had to. I'd come home from work, heat up something frozen, and stare at the wall in my living room like it owed me answers. I ignored the texts, the letters, even the knock on the door one night that I swear was Lily again, though I didn't check. I just stood in the hallway, holding my breath, waiting for it to stop. There's a kind of numbness that sets in when you realize your absence only became important to people when it threatened their convenience. When you realize your peace isn't something they care about. It's just something that made you harder to control. I started questioning everything. Why had I left? Why hadn't I burned the bridge publicly? Why hadn't I screamed back at my dad that night, instead of slipping away like a shadow? Part of me felt like a coward. Another part of me knew that silence had always been my sharpest weapon. But at that moment, sitting on the edge of my bed, surrounded by unopened letters and the ghost of my childhood, I didn't feel powerful. I felt exhausted. And then, one night, something cracked. It was raining. Hard. That kind of cold, sideways Portland rain that makes your bones ache even through a jacket. I was walking home from the grocery store, hoodie soaked, the handles of the paper bag biting into my fingers, when I saw a little bookstore on the corner I'd never noticed before. There was a flickering neon sign in the window that just said, open. I ducked inside mostly to dry off. I didn't even plan to stay long. But it was warm, and quiet, and smelled like cedarwood and old pages. The kind of place that doesn't exist in chain stores anymore. Behind the counter sat an older guy with a silver ponytail and half-moon glasses. He didn't say a word, just nodded at me and kept reading. I wondered. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but my eyes landed on a thin paperback tucked between two bigger, shinier titles. The Gift of Being Overlooked. I picked it up, flipped through it. It wasn't a memoir, not really. More like a collection of short essays by people who'd been written off, by family, society, teachers, whoever, and had gone on to quietly build lives that mattered. Not loud success, not fame, just meaning. I bought the book, read the whole thing in 2 days, and something in me shifted. I realized I'd been treating my life in Portland like it was a pause, like eventually, I'd be forced to hit play again and return to the world I'd left. But what if this wasn't the pause? What if that life, my old one, was the false start? I wasn't a failure. I wasn't broken. I wasn't the mistake they kept. I just hadn't started yet. So I started. Slowly, quietly, deliberately. I left my analyst job. It was safe, sure, but it was draining the life out of me. I'd been building up savings, living frugally, freelancing on the side, taking on odd photography gigs when I could. I'd never needed much. I started working full-time as a freelance photographer. Weddings, local events, portraits, real estate shoots. I didn't have the best gear, but I had an eye, and I cared. And word of mouth spreads fast when you actually show up on time and treat people like humans. I joined a local co-working space. It was small, just a few desks, some beat-up couches, and a weirdly aggressive espresso machine. But it was filled with people who were building things. Startups, art, nonprofits, stuff that mattered. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of a community where no one cared who your parents were or what your last name meant. That's also where I met Mara. She was a UX designer, always wearing mismatched socks and drinking some kind of horrifying green juice. We were desk neighbors. She made me laugh. I made her playlists. One night, We stayed late working on our respective projects, and she looked up from her laptop and said, "You ever think you're here for a reason?" I blinked. "Like in Portland?" "No. I mean here. Alive. Doing what you're doing." "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly I just feel lucky to be out of the wrong place." She smiled. "That counts." We started dating not long after, and it was different than anything I'd ever experienced. She didn't try to fix me, didn't pry. She just saw me. And for someone like me, someone who'd grown up feeling like wallpaper in his own life, that was a bigger deal than I could explain. Around that time, I got serious about my own project. It started as a blog, a place to put my thoughts. I called it Second Draft. Stories, reflections, photos from my shoots, pieces of myself that I'd always kept hidden because I didn't think they mattered. But they did. People started reading, subscribing, sharing. One post in particular went kind of mini-viral. It was titled, "When You Realize You Were the Family Scapegoat." I didn't name names. I didn't even say it was my story. But it struck a nerve. Hundreds of comments. Emails from strangers. People saying, "I thought I was the only one." That's when I realized my story wasn't unique. It was just unspoken. And speaking it out loud, that was power. I bought better gear, took online business classes, upgraded my website, started taking on clients who aligned with my values, nonprofits, activist groups, small businesses trying to do something meaningful. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't struggling either. I had purpose. I had roots. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had anything to prove to anyone. Which is why, when the final letter came, I didn't cry. I didn't freeze. I didn't even get angry. I just read it. This one was from my mom. Short, handwritten, shaky, but legible. "Your father is dying. Please come home." That was it. No guilt. No lecture. No check. Just those 6 words. I sat with the letter for a long time. Read it again. Then again. And I realized something. They weren't reaching out to fix what they broke. They were reaching out because they feared being forgotten. And I had already forgotten them. But this time, I wouldn't just disappear. This time, I wouldn't run. This time, I'd show up. Not because they wanted me to, but because I had something they didn't expect. Power. I didn't decide to go back right away. The letter sat on my desk for a full week, unopened after that first reading. Every time I walked past it, I caught myself glancing at the crease in the paper, the slanted handwriting, the way she didn't even sign it. "Love, Mom. Just please come home." Home. That word had never felt less accurate. Still, I knew I'd go. Not because I wanted to make peace. Not because I forgave them. But because I needed to see it. I needed to know how much had really changed. If they were still clinging to the narrative that I was the problem. If they still thought they could rope me back into the orbit of their broken little galaxy. And, if I was being honest with myself, part of me wanted to look them in the eyes and let them see what they'd thrown away. But I wouldn't go unprepared. If this was the end game, I was going to play it like chess, quiet, deliberate, 3 moves ahead. They didn't know what I'd built in those 2 years. They didn't know I wasn't scared of them anymore. And most importantly, they didn't know I had something they never expected. Leverage. It started with the business. My father's company, let's call it Westbrook Industrial, was a mid-sized manufacturing firm based in Ohio. Family-owned. My grandfather started it after World War II, my dad expanded it, and Josh was set to inherit it. I'd never shown any interest in it growing up, which suited them fine. I was the artsy one, the dreamer, the one who took pictures instead of learning about quarterly reports. But I had paid attention. Quietly. Over the years, I'd absorbed more than they realized. And when I got that last letter, I decided to dig. First stop was the Public Business Registry. Took me less than 10 minutes to find the company's filings, corporate structure, and board information. Westbrook Industrial was still privately held, but they'd taken on some investors in the last decade. Minority stakeholders, listed in dry, boring legalese. I cross-referenced a few names. One stood out, a holding company based in Chicago. I knew the name. I'd done freelance work for a startup that was later acquired by them. That was my opening. I made a call. Reached out to an old contact, Sarah, a former project manager at the startup who now worked at the holding company's venture arm. We hadn't talked in a year, but she remembered me. "Connor? Oh my God, I still use your headshots from that event you did. What's up?" We talked. Caught up. I asked if she knew anything about Westbrook Industrial. She paused. "Is that your family's company?" "Long story," I said. "Let's just say I might be involved soon, and I want to know what I'm walking into." She laughed. Smart. Honestly, we've been a little concerned. They've missed 2 deliverables this quarter. Supply chain's been shaky since your dad got sick. That got my attention. She kept going. We don't own enough to make big waves. But if you're about to take some kind of leadership role, let's just say, we'd be happy to have a voice on the inside. That confirmed it. They were vulnerable. My father was clearly declining. Josh, despite all his arrogance, was likely fumbling with the reins. And the board, probably handpicked by my dad years ago, was likely split between loyalty and uncertainty. It was a house of cards, and I was going to blow. But first, I needed to get closer. On my terms. So I wrote back. A letter. Handwritten. Simple. I'll come. I'll visit. But I need full transparency. I want to see the will, the trust, the business records. If you truly want me involved, then treat me like someone who matters. Otherwise, I won't step foot in that house again. I mailed it and waited. 3 days later, Josh called. I didn't answer. He called again. Left a voicemail. You're being dramatic. Just come home. Dad's dying. I deleted it. A day later, I got an email from their lawyer. The tone was different. Dear Connor, I've been instructed to provide you with full access to the Westbrook industrial documents per your request. Please find attached. It was all there. PDF after PDF. Financial reports. Shareholder breakdowns. Executive roles. And buried within it, a clause in the trust that hadn't been updated since I was a teenager. I was still technically listed as a contingent beneficiary, not primary, but not zero. Meaning, I had legal standing. I forwarded the documents to a lawyer I'd met through one of my photography clients, a corporate attorney who moonlighted helping small creators with contracts. I asked for a deep read. She got back to me the next day. You've got more power than you think, she said. They can't just write you out unless they prove you're unreachable or have formally declined. And they haven't done either. If you want to contest any restructuring, you've got ground to stand on. I smiled for the first time in days. Then I started assembling my toolkit. I reached out to Mara, told her everything. She didn't blink. Just said, so what's the play? I need to go back, I said. But I need to look like I'm surrendering. She raised an eyebrow. Connor, you don't do surrender. Exactly. That's why it'll work. The next few weeks were a blur. I updated my portfolio, built a case study on my most successful client projects, created a private landing page labeled Westbrook Media Proposal, a full pitch deck showing how I could help modernize the branding and outreach of the company using my skills. It wasn't just pretty pictures. It was strategy, analytics, growth projections, social impact campaigns, ESG alignment. I knew Josh would scoff. I wanted him to, because while he was busy dismissing me, I'd be planting seeds. I flew out mid-September, told no one but Mara and my lawyer. When I landed, I rented a car and drove straight to the hospital. My dad was awake, hooked up to machines, thinner than I remembered. His skin looked gray, but his eyes lit up when I walked in. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. It's okay, I said, sitting beside the bed. Don't talk. He grabbed my hand, squeezed weakly. We didn't say much, just sat there. And for a moment, I let myself feel it. The grief, the anger, the leftover love I didn't know was still there. But I didn't stay long. I left him a note before I walked out. We'll talk. Soon. But not here. Next, I went to the house. Josh opened the door, smirked like I was a stray dog that finally limped home. Took you long enough, he said. I didn't flinch. I had things to do. He stepped aside. Mom's in the sunroom. You remember where that is, right? I did. Of course I did. I remembered everything. I walked through the house like it was a museum of past humiliation. The staircase where I once tripped carrying plates and got mocked for weeks. The dining table where my dad once laughed about me taking an art elective. The hallway where my mom once said, I just wish you were more like your brother. It all came flooding back. But I wasn't that kid anymore. And they didn't know who they were dealing with. I spent the next 3 days observing, listening, watching. Josh clearly thought he was in charge. He barked at staff, talked over the lawyer, treated Mom like a fragile PR problem to be managed. But I saw the cracks. The way the accountant flinched when Josh asked about reallocating funds. The way the board's emails were peppered with passive-aggressive uncertainty. They didn't trust him. They were looking for someone else. I gave them a candidate. Me. Quietly. Subtly. Over dinners, I asked questions. Took notes. Pointed out holes in the marketing strategy. Showed them how their competitors were outpacing them digitally. I didn't criticize. I offered solutions. Helpful, humble, unthreatening. Until I wasn't. At the end of the week, I requested a meeting. Not with my family. With the board. I presented my proposal. Not as a hostile takeover. As an invitation. I showed them how I could create a new division, Westbrook Media, that would bring in new revenue, revitalize the brand, and position the company for the future. I showed them my numbers, my growth projections, my case studies. I showed them me. And they listened. Even the ones who remembered me as the mistake. Because in business, results speak louder than blood. After the meeting, one of the board members pulled me aside. "Connor," he said, "I don't know what happened between you and your family, but I'll tell you this, what you just presented. It's exactly what this company needs." I nodded. That's all I ever wanted to be. Needed. He smiled. "I think you just changed everything." And I had. But it wasn't over yet. Because now that I had a foot in the door, it was time to kick it open. I didn't swing the hammer all at once. That would have been too easy and too obvious. No, I did it slowly, carefully, like someone unpicking a knot that had been tangled for years. The first thread I pulled was the most delicate, the one holding my father's company together. After the board meeting, I got provisional approval to begin groundwork on Westbrook Media, a digital modernization division under the company umbrella. It started as a pet project, something they could test with minimal risk. But in reality, it was my Trojan horse. A sanction role, an official title, a seat at the table, and that was all I needed. Josh didn't like it. Not one bit. He tried to play it cool. "Happy to have you on board, little bro," but the way he gripped the arms of his chair during meetings said everything. He didn't expect me to stay. He thought I'd drop in, make peace with Dad, maybe collect a check and go back to Portland. He didn't realize I was building something. Something real. I worked 12-hour days. Hired a skeleton crew of freelancers I trusted. Designed a rebranding campaign. Ran analytics. Optimized logistics on the back end. Meanwhile, I met with vendors, legacy clients, even skeptical board members who thought I was just another soft creative. I spoke their language. Numbers. ROI. Retention. I showed them results. The board began to shift. And Josh, he began to unravel. The more I succeeded, the more obvious his failures became. He'd been coasting for years on the assumption that he was the heir apparent. But he didn't understand the modern business landscape. He didn't adapt, didn't innovate. Worst of all, he micromanaged, pushing loyal employees to the brink, firing anyone who pushed back, padding his authority with yes men while the company bled slowly from the inside. I didn't need to sabotage him. He was doing that all by himself. All I did was document it. Every complaint, every missed metric, every private contractor whose payments were delayed or mismanaged under his leadership. I gathered it quietly, professionally. I wasn't just taking notes. I was building a dossier. And when the time came, I'd show it to the exact people who needed to see it. But first, I had to make things right with the one person I hadn't confronted directly. My father. He was back home by then, recovering in a private wing of the house. We hadn't spoken much since my return, and for the first few weeks, he mostly slept. But one morning, I found him awake, staring out the window at the backyard like he didn't recognize it. I sat beside him. He didn't look at me right away. "I heard you're turning the company into a media circus," he said flatly. I smiled. "Just trying to make it profitable." He exhaled through his nose, half a laugh, half a sigh. "Never thought you'd come back." "I didn't come back," I said. I moved forward. He nodded slowly. "Your mother says you're doing good work." I waited, then said, "She also told me what you said at the reunion." He winced. "It was a joke," he said. "A bad one." "No," I said. "It was the truth. Just not the kind you meant to say out loud." He didn't reply. I leaned in. "You wanted to humiliate me, to remind everyone where I stand." He didn't deny it. I stood to leave. But before I walked out, I said, "You don't have to like me. You don't have to love me. But if you want the company to survive, you'll need me." He closed his eyes. And I walked out. That night, Josh cornered me in the garage. Red-faced. Sweating. "You think you're clever?" he hissed. "Sliding into meetings, kissing up to the board, playing the underdog card? They're just humoring you. You're still the screw-up. You always will be." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Josh. I was the backup plan. And now, I'm the exit strategy." He stormed off. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Sarah, the contact at the holding company with minority shares. She was blunt. We're voting at the next board meeting. We're backing your proposal. What proposal? I asked, playing dumb. She chuckled. Don't play coy. Your plan to restructure the executive branch. Phase out legacy leadership. Consolidate operations. I let out a slow breath. It passed committee with flying colors. Your numbers are airtight. And frankly, no one trusts your brother anymore. It was time. The final board meeting was a closed session. All executives. No assistants. No distractions. I came prepared. Slide deck. Financials. Performance data. Testimonial letters from longtime vendors who supported my plan. Then, quietly, methodically, I presented the dossier. I didn't embellish. I didn't gloat. I just laid out the facts. The contracts Josh had mishandled. The employees he'd fired without cause. The suppliers he shorted. The clients he lost. The morale he tanked. And then I ended with this. Westbrook Industrial has survived 3 generations not because of bloodlines, but because of leadership. We can't afford entitlement. We need stewardship. Accountability. Vision. I clicked the final slide. It read, Proposal. Install Connor Westbrook as Acting Executive Director of Westbrook Media and Strategic Operations. Immediate effect. Silence. Then a board member cleared her throat. I second the motion. Another voice. All in favor? Hands went up. Unanimous. Josh looked like someone had slapped him with a brick. He stood up, ready to scream, but Dad, frail, quiet Dad, spoke from the end of the table. Sit down, Josh. And he did. He actually sat. Later, in the hallway, Josh tried to corner me again. But this time, there was no venom. Just disbelief. You can't just take this. I shrugged. I didn't take it. I earned it. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. After all, I wasn't the mistake anymore. I was the reckoning. Over the next 6 months, I turned the company around. Revenue increased. Public image improved. Internal culture shifted. I promoted people who had been overlooked for years. I created new internships. I built partnerships with nonprofits. We even launched a scholarship in my grandfather's name. My dad retired officially. He didn't say much. But one day, he handed me an envelope with a photo inside. Me at 5 years old, covered in finger paint, grinning like a maniac. He said, I didn't know what to do with you back then. I know, I said, but I figured it out myself. He nodded. You did. My mom cried when I told her I was staying in town for now. Not because I felt obligated, but because I had earned my place. On my terms. And Lily? She apologized. Truly. We met for coffee and had the most honest conversation of our lives. She admitted she'd been scared of being on the outside too. That maybe that's why she stayed silent all those years. I forgave her. Not because she asked me to, but because I was ready. And Josh, he left the company. Quietly. Shamefully. He still shows up to family events. Still tries to act like the center of attention. But now, the room doesn't revolve around him. No one laughs at his jokes the same way. And me? I don't shrink in his presence anymore. I exist. Fully. Authentically. Unapologetically. It took me 28 years, 2 time zones, and 1,000 miles of silence to get here. But in the end, I wasn't the mistake they kept. I was the lesson they never saw coming. And now, they'll never forget. My name is Emily, and until a year ago, I thought my parents loved me. Or at least, I thought they cared about me enough to treat me fairly. Looking back, I don't know if I was just naive or if I had been ignoring the signs my whole life. Because if I had been paying attention, I would have seen it. Jessica was always their favorite. She was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. The one whose happiness was more important than anyone else's. And I was the afterthought, the younger sister who was supposed to be understanding, to be okay with getting less, to be fine with being put second. And for a long time, I was. I grew up in Jessica's shadow. When she wanted something, she got it. I wasn't even jealous. I had learned early on that this was just the way things were. If I asked for something, I usually got a maybe, or we'll see. If she asked, it was an automatic yes. But I never thought they would take something that was mine. My college fund had been set up when I was young. I don't remember the details, just that my grandparents had left some money for my education, and my parents had always reassured me that when the time came, I wouldn't have to worry. It's not a fortune. My dad had told me when I was in high school, but it's enough to get you through. I had never questioned it. Never thought to check how much was actually there. Never worried about it at all. And then, one evening, everything changed. I remember that night so clearly. I was sitting at the dinner table, going over some last-minute paperwork for my college applications. My acceptance letters had already come in, and I was trying to decide which school to choose. It was an exciting kind of stress, the kind that felt like the beginning of something big. My parents were in the kitchen, talking in hushed voices. I wasn't paying attention at first, too focused on my laptop screen. But then I heard my sister's name. Jessica had gotten engaged a few months earlier, and the wedding planning had been in full swing. Every conversation in our house revolved around color schemes, catering, venues, and guest lists. It was exhausting. At first, I thought they were just talking about more wedding details, but something in my mom's tone made me stop typing. I wasn't sure why, but I had the sudden urge to listen. Completely covered, she was saying. The venue alone was nearly $25,000. My dad sighed. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I know, she said, and I want it to be perfect for her. She deserves the best. There was a pause. Then my dad's voice, quieter this time. You took care of the rest, right? My mom hesitated. It's done. What about Emily? My stomach twisted at the sound of my name. She'll be fine, my mom said, her voice light, almost dismissive. She can take out loans. I froze. For a second, I thought I had misheard. Loans? I turned in my seat, heart pounding as I stared at them. What are you talking about? They both looked up, surprised. I hadn't meant to say it so loudly, but the words had come out sharp, demanding. My mom gave me a small smile, like she was trying to reassure a child. Oh, sweetheart, don't worry about it. I pushed my chair back, standing up. Don't worry about what? My dad let out a heavy sigh. Emily, sit down. I didn't. Instead, I took a step closer, my mind racing. What did you mean when you said I could take out loans? My mom and dad exchanged a look, and I could tell they were deciding how much to tell me, how much they could get away with. I felt sick. Finally, my mom let out a small sigh, like this was a conversation she really didn't want to have. We had to move some things around, she said, to make sure everything was covered for the wedding. I stared at her. What things? I asked, even though I already knew. She hesitated again. Then, finally, in the same casual tone someone might use to tell you they had run out of milk, she said, we used your college fund. My ears started ringing. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I looked at my dad, hoping, praying that he would say something, that he would tell me she was wrong. He didn't. Instead, he just sighed again, rubbing his temples like I was the one being difficult. Emily, don't overreact. Overreact. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You used my college fund for Jessica's wedding. And you think I'm overreacting? My mom frowned, looking genuinely confused. Well, yes. You can always take out loans, Emily. College isn't going anywhere. I gripped the edge of the table. That money was supposed to be for my education. And you'll still get an education, she said patiently, like I was a stubborn child. Plenty of people take out student loans. It's normal. I could feel my hands shaking. It was my money. It was family money, my dad corrected. And we had to make a choice. I shook my head, trying to process this. A choice? Between my future and a party? Emily, my mom sighed, exasperated now. It's not just a party. It's Jessica's wedding. It's one of the most important days of her life. We couldn't just give her a half-hearted celebration. I felt like I was going to throw up. All my life, I had known that Jessica was their favorite. But this was something else. This was them telling me, in no uncertain terms, that her one day mattered more than my entire future. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. And you weren't even going to tell me? We were going to sit you down and explain, my dad said, like that made it better. We just hadn't gotten around to it yet. I clenched my jaw. Jessica chose that moment to walk into the kitchen, humming to herself. She stopped when she saw me, her eyes flicking between me and our parents. What's going on? I turned to look at her, and suddenly, the anger inside me had a direction. You knew, didn't you? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Jessica blinked. Knew what? That they were using my college fund to pay for your wedding. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she shrugged. Mom and Dad said it was fine. They said you'd be okay. My whole body went cold. She didn't even care. I had always thought of Jessica as selfish, but I never thought she would be this selfish. You didn't even think to ask me? I whispered. Didn't think to see if I was okay with it? She frowned. Emily, why are you making such a big deal out of this? I laughed. I actually laughed. Because it is a big deal, I snapped. That money was for my future. And you just, I gestured wildly, my voice rising, took it. Jessica rolled her eyes. Oh my God. Are you really going to throw a tantrum over this? I felt my heart shatter. I looked at my parents. And you're really okay with this? My mom gave me a small, condescending smile. Sweetheart, you'll understand when you're older. I stared at them, my chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out the door. I don't remember getting into my car. I don't remember turning the key in the ignition or backing out of the driveway. All I remember is the way my hands trembled on the steering wheel, the way my vision blurred as I tried to blink back the tears. I drove without thinking. My mind kept replaying the conversation over and over, each word slicing deeper. You'll understand when you're older. Why are you making such a big deal? It was family money. I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. My parents had chosen Jessica. Again. But this time, they hadn't just favored her. They had taken from me. Taken something that was supposed to be mine, something I had counted on. And they hadn't even cared enough to tell me. I let my head fall against the steering wheel, my breath shaky. This wasn't just about the money. It was about what it meant. They didn't value me. They didn't care about my future. They didn't even see me as important enough to deserve a conversation before they made their decision. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, my phone buzzed. I wiped my face and looked at the screen. Jessica texted, "Are you seriously still mad? You're being dramatic." I stared at the message. Then slowly, I turned my phone off and set it down. I had a decision to make. I could go back home. I could cry. I could beg them to reconsider, though I knew it wouldn't change anything. Or I could accept the truth. I could stop expecting them to be different. I could stop waiting for them to see me the way I had always wanted them to. And I could walk away. It wasn't an easy decision. But in that moment, sitting alone in my car with the weight of betrayal pressing down on me, I made a choice. I was going to take care of myself. I didn't go back home that night. Instead, I went to a friend's house, someone who had always been there for me in ways my own family never had. She didn't ask too many questions, just let me crash on her couch and gave me a blanket. The next morning, I started looking for jobs. I wasn't going to college anymore, at least not right away. I had no money for it, and I sure as hell wasn't about to put myself in debt while my sister waltzed into a fairy tale wedding funded by what was supposed to be my future. So I worked. At first, it was just a basic job at a coffee shop. Early shifts, long hours, aching feet. But I wasn't just working for a paycheck. I was working with a purpose. Every spare moment, I was learning. I spent my nights researching, watching videos, taking notes. I stumbled into the world of online business, side hustles, passive income. And for the first time, I felt hopeful. I started a small business online. At first, it barely made anything, just a couple of dollars here and there. But I kept at it. While Jessica was off planning her wedding, I was building something real. By the time her wedding day arrived, I wasn't there. I wasn't invited. Not that I would have gone anyway. They never called to ask where I was, never sent a message to check in. It was like I had just stopped existing to them. And honestly, that was fine. Because while they were celebrating Jessica's big day, I was grinding. I was putting in the work. And by the end of that first year, I had done what I never thought possible. I had made $300,000. 1 year later, I was sitting in my apartment, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer. I pressed the button and lifted it to my ear. Hello. There was a pause. Then Emily. I knew that voice. It was my mother. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs. Well, didn't expect to hear from you. There was an awkward chuckle. Well, sweetheart, it's been a while. How have you been? I smiled to myself. Oh, just making a living. Another pause. That's good, she said quickly. That's really good. I waited. I could feel it coming. Well, she continued, her voice suddenly much softer. We were actually hoping we could talk to you about something. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, yes, she said, clearing her throat. You see, things have been a little difficult for us financially lately. There it was. I almost laughed. Oh, I said again, keeping my voice neutral. What happened? Well, she hesitated. We had to take out some loans for Jessica's wedding, and things haven't exactly been easy. Your father and I were just wondering if you might be able to help out a little. Just until you get back on your feet? I finished for her. My voice was calm, but inside, I felt a slow, burning amusement. There was a pause. Yes, she said, A little too quickly. Just a little help. You know, as a family. Family. The word felt foreign coming from her. I leaned back in my chair, twirling a pin between my fingers. Just curious, I said, keeping my tone casual. But why me? Another pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Well, she finally said, we know you've been doing well for yourself. I let that sit between us for a moment. So they knew. They had ignored me for a year. No calls, no texts, not even a passing, how have you been? But now, suddenly, when they were struggling, they remembered I existed. I could picture it so clearly, Jessica whining about money, my parents wringing their hands, then someone saying, wait a minute, doesn't Emily have money now? I wanted to laugh. Instead, I tilted my head, my voice still light. I thought you said I could always take out loans? Silence. I waited. Then my mother let out a nervous chuckle. Oh, sweetheart, that was different. Was it? I asked, my voice sharp now. Well, yes, she said, as if it were obvious. You were young. You had time to figure things out. We just thought. No, I interrupted, my patience thinning. You didn't think. Not about me, anyway. There was a shift in her tone, a little more forceful now. Emily, don't be like this. We are still your parents. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. I laughed. I actually laughed. Everything you've done for me? I repeated, incredulous. You stole my college fund. You didn't even tell me about it. I had to find out like an afterthought. You didn't care about how it would affect me. You didn't even bother to check on me after I left. And now that you need money, I'm suddenly your daughter again. That's not fair, she said sharply. Fair. I shot back. Fair would have been giving me a choice. Fair would have been at least acknowledging what you did instead of brushing it off. But you didn't, because you didn't care. And now you expect me to care about your problems? She scoffed, as if I was being ridiculous. Emily, we are your family. We took care of you for years, gave you a roof over your head. And now, when we need you, you're just going to turn your back on us. Ah, there it was. The guilt trip. Classic. I exhaled slowly. I don't owe you anything. The words came out quiet. Firm. Final. Excuse me, she said, her voice sharp with disbelief. I don't owe you anything, I repeated, my voice steady. You made your choice. You chose Jessica. You chose her wedding over my future. You told me to take out loans if I wanted to go to college. So, why don't you do the same? There was a sharp inhale on the other end of the line. Then a how dare you? Bingo. My mother's voice had lost all its fake sweetness. Now, she sounded like what she truly was, angry, entitled, desperate. After everything we've done for you, you're just going to let us struggle? I felt a smile tug at my lips. Yep. You ungrateful little, I hung up. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt free. But I should have expected what happened next. A week after that phone call, I was enjoying a quiet Saturday morning in my apartment, sipping coffee and scrolling through my phone, when I heard a knock at the door. At first, I thought it was a package delivery or maybe a neighbor. But when I checked the peephole, my stomach twisted. Standing outside were my parents. And behind them, arms crossed and looking annoyed, was Jessica. I took a deep breath, schooling my features into something neutral before unlocking the door and opening it just a crack. Emily, my mother said, her voice laced with false warmth. Sweetheart, we just wanted to talk. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Because last time we talked, you called me ungrateful and hung up on me. My father cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. We were upset, he muttered, avoiding my gaze. Jessica scoffed, arms still crossed. Yeah, well, you were being a total bee. I shut the door in their faces. The knock came again. Harder this time. Emily, my mother snapped. Don't you dare. I opened the door again, leaning against the frame. If you're just here to insult me, you can turn right back around. My mother took a deep breath, forcing a tight-lipped smile. We're not here to fight. We just want to have a conversation. Face to face. Like a family. A family. Now they wanted to act like we were one. I folded my arms. Fine. Say what you need to say. They exchanged glances before my father spoke. Emily, we're struggling, he said, as if that wasn't already clear. Things have been tough, and, well, we could really use your help. I tilted my head. Huh, that's funny, because a year ago, when I was struggling, you told me I could just take out loans. Jessica groaned. Oh my God, are you still on about that? I smiled sweetly. You mean the part where my entire future was stolen from me so you could have a Pinterest wedding? Yeah, Jess. I am still on about that. Her face turned red. You're being ridiculous. You're rich now, aren't you? It's not like you even needed college. Why does it even matter anymore? I let out a low laugh. Well, you really don't get it, do you? I shook my head, then turned to my parents. You know, I remember when I begged you not to touch my college fund. You shrugged and said I'd be fine. You told me I'd figure it out. My mother stiffened. Emily, that's not. I cut her off, mimicking her tone from that day. Loans exist for a reason. A little struggle builds character. You're young, you'll bounce back. Their faces dropped. I watched them squirm for a second before continuing, my voice dripping with mock concern. So why don't you take out loans? Why don't you build some character? Struggle a little. You're not too old to bounce back, right? Jessica's face twisted in rage. That's not fair. I smirked. Oh, so now you care about fairness? My father sighed heavily. Emily, we are your family. Families help each other. I let that sink in for a moment. Then, very calmly, I said, you weren't my family when you stole my future. You weren't my family when you didn't invite me to the wedding. You weren't my family when you ignored me for a year. You only remembered I was family when you needed money. Silence. Jessica clenched her fists. God, you're such a selfish brat. I shrugged. Maybe, but at least I can afford to be. That was it. That was the final straw. My mother's face twisted in rage, and my father muttered something under his breath, but I didn't care. I stepped back inside and, without another word, I shut the door in their faces. And this time, I didn't open it again. Another year passed. I didn't hear from them again. Not directly, at least. I'd get the occasional passive-aggressive text from distant relatives. Things like, family is forever, Emily, or you'll regret turning your back on the people who raised you. I ignored them, because while they were busy wallowing in self-pity, I was thriving. My business exploded. What started as a side hustle became a full-fledged empire. By the time I turned 23, I wasn't just comfortable, I was a millionaire. And my family? Oh, they were drowning. It wasn't just the debts. Jessica's marriage, the one they destroyed my future to fund, fell apart within a year. Turns out, the perfect wedding doesn't guarantee a perfect marriage. She moved back home, broke, bitter, and angry at the world. My parents were worse off than ever. My dad's job cut his hours. My mom's little side business never took off. And with the economy the way it was, they were struggling to keep the house. And still, I heard nothing from them. Until one day, I got a text. Mom texted, Emily, please call me. It's important. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then, out of pure curiosity, I called. She picked up on the first ring. Emily, she breathed, like she'd just been rescued from a shipwreck. Oh, sweetheart. I cut her off. What do you want? A pause. Then, the sob story started. How they were behind on the mortgage. How the bills were piling up. How the stress was tearing the family apart. And then, the real reason she called. Emily, she said, her voice trembling, we need your help. I smiled. Oh, what kind of help? She hesitated, like she was debating whether to say it outright or dance around it. Finally, she swallowed her pride. Financial help, she admitted. Just something to get us back on our feet. I almost laughed. The sheer audacity. I leaned back in my chair, twirling a pin between my fingers. So, let me get this straight, I said slowly. You stole my future. You forced me to struggle. You told me to just take out loans. And now, you want a handout. It's not like that, she said quickly. Emily, we're family. Oh, you mean like how I was family when you stole my college fund? Or when you didn't invite me to the wedding? Or when you ignored me for a year? Silence. I let it stretch for a moment before sighing dramatically. Well, Mom, I said, loans exist for a reason. Her breath hitched. A little struggle builds character, I continued. You're not too old to bounce back, right? She started crying. I let her. When she finally stammered out, I don't know what we're going to do. I just smiled and said, you'll figure it out. And then, I hung up. I haven't spoken to them since. As I sat there, staring at my phone screen, I couldn't help but wonder, was I being cruel? Let me know in the comments. My name's Ryan, I'm 28, and last weekend was supposed to be one of the best days of my life. After years of working 2 jobs, eating instant noodles, and living in a cramped apartment with paper-thin walls, I finally bought my first house. Nothing huge or fancy. A modest 3-bedroom with a little backyard and a creaky porch swing. But to me, it was perfect. It was mine. No landlords, no roommates, No one telling me what I could or couldn't hang on the walls. I signed the closing papers on a Thursday and immediately started planning a housewarming for Saturday. It wasn't going to be extravagant, just some snacks, a few drinks, and a chance for everyone to see the place I had worked so hard for. I spent Friday night cleaning, arranging furniture, and even stringing up cheap fairy lights in the living room to make it look warm and inviting. There was this giddy, nervous excitement in my chest as I pictured my parents walking in and smiling, my younger brother cracking a joke about how I finally had a kitchen big enough to burn toast in, my cousins laughing and exploring all the rooms. For once, I thought, we'd be together for something I accomplished, not for one of my brother's endless milestones. My brother, Matt, is 26. He's the golden child, no other way to put it. Growing up, he got the praise, the new clothes, the soccer trophies displayed in the living room. I was the quiet one, the kid who figured out how to fix things around the house so Dad didn't have to call a plumber. I didn't mind most of the time. Matt was more outgoing and charming, so it made sense he got more attention. But as we got older, the favoritism became harder to ignore. When Matt got a promotion, the whole family went out to dinner. When I graduated college, my parents sent a congrats text with a thumbs up emoji. I told myself I wouldn't let that bitterness ruin my housewarming. This was about celebrating something good. The morning of the party, I woke up early, practically buzzing. I set out drinks on the counter, made sure there were enough chairs, even bought a cake that said, "Welcome home, Ryan," in blue icing. I sent a group text reminder. "Hey everyone, housewarming starts at 5. Can't wait to see you." My phone stayed quiet except for a single thumbs up from my cousin Sarah. I shrugged it off. Maybe everyone was busy getting ready. 5 o'clock rolled around. The lights were on. Music was playing softly from a Bluetooth speaker, and I stood by the front window, waiting for the first car to pull up. By 5:30, no one had come. By 6 o'clock, I was pacing around the kitchen, checking my phone every 30 seconds. Finally, I opened Instagram out of boredom, and that's when I saw it. My entire family was tagged in a photo, standing in my parents' driveway, grinning ear to ear in front of Matt's brand new car. A shiny black luxury SUV with a giant red bow on top. My mom's caption read, "So proud of you, Matt. You deserve this." Comment after comment from relatives said things like, "What a beauty," and "Congrats, champ." My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen for a long moment before I set my phone down and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cake I'd bought. The house felt unbearably quiet, the fairy lights suddenly looking silly and sad. I didn't cry, though. I just sat there and let the disappointment settle in, like a heavy blanket I couldn't shake off. Around 7:15, just as I was about to start packing up the food, my phone lit up with Mom's name. I hesitated, then picked up. "Ryan," she said without even a hello, "we need to talk about the house." Her tone wasn't congratulatory. It was serious, clipped. For a moment, I thought maybe she was going to apologize for missing the party, but something in her voice made my chest tighten. "What about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We think it would make sense if Matt stayed there during the week," she said matter-of-factly, as though she was talking about borrowing a lawn mower and not my entire house. I blinked, stunned into silence. "You just bought it, sure, but his job is closer to that area and he needs a place to stay during the work week," she continued, as if the logistics were already settled. "You wouldn't even notice. He'd just sleep there, maybe keep some clothes in one of the rooms. It's only fair to help him out, considering how expensive his car was." I didn't say anything at first. My fingers dug into the edge of the table as I stared at the glowing cake across from me, its frosting still perfectly smooth and untouched. "Mom," I finally said slowly, "this is my house. I worked for this. And we're proud of you." She replied quickly, like she was checking a box. "But family helps each other. Don't be selfish about this." I swallowed hard, feeling a strange mix of anger and disbelief simmering in my chest. As she kept talking, explaining why it just made sense for my younger brother to essentially take over my new place, I found myself looking around my empty living room, the one I had cleaned for hours, the one no one had shown up to celebrate. For the first time, it hit me that this wasn't just a thoughtless request. It was something bigger, something that had been building for years, and if I gave in now, it would never stop. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch as my mom waited for me to agree. My heart was pounding, my hands still clenched around the phone, and all I could think was, They had skipped my housewarming to celebrate my brother, and now they wanted the house too. And that's when I decided something, but I didn't say it yet. I just said, "We'll talk later," and hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty doorway, my mind racing. Something inside me was shifting, hardening. Because if they thought this was going to be easy, they had no idea what was coming next. After I hung up, the house felt even quieter than before. I walked to the living room, turned off the fairy lights, and sat on the floor with my back against the couch. It wasn't just about them missing my housewarming anymore. It was about everything. Years of feeling like I was second place, like every milestone of mine was just a footnote in someone else's story. I thought about how Mom used to keep Matt's soccer jerseys framed in the hallway, while my college degree was still sitting in the box it came in. The next morning, I woke up to 6 unread messages in the family group chat. The first one was from Mom. "Ryan, we really need to discuss Matt using the house." The next was from Dad. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." My stomach twisted. It wasn't just a request anymore. It was an expectation. Then came a message from Matt himself. "Hey bro, Mom said you're being weird about this. Chill. It's just a couple nights a week. I'll bring my own food." I stared at that text for a good minute before tossing my phone onto the bed. Just a couple nights a week. Just. That word made me want to laugh, bitterly. It wasn't just a couple nights a week. It was me giving up my privacy, my space, the one thing I had worked so hard to get. By noon, Mom called again. This time I let it ring, but she immediately followed up with a voicemail. Her voice was sweet, almost rehearsed. "Ryan, honey, we just want what's best for everyone. Matt has so much pressure right now. He needs support. You know how stressful his job is. We're counting on you to do the right thing." I played the message twice, my jaw tightening each time. It was the same tactic as always. Make me feel guilty until I agree. That afternoon, I drove to my parents' house because I didn't want this to spiral over text. When I pulled up, Matt's new car was still in the driveway, gleaming like it had been washed just minutes ago. I knocked on the door and Mom answered, looking pleasantly surprised, like nothing was wrong. "Ryan, finally," she said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Come in, let's talk about the house." I stepped inside, glancing around. Dad was sitting in his recliner, flipping through the mail. Matt was on the couch, grinning like this was all some kind of joke. "So," Mom began, sitting down across from me. "We've been thinking." "You mean you've been deciding?" I interrupted, my voice calm but flat. She blinked, clearly not expecting me to cut in. "Deciding? You already told Matt he could stay there, didn't you?" I asked, glancing toward my brother. Matt shrugged, not even looking guilty. "Well, yeah, I figured you'd be fine with it." That was the moment something in me clicked. It wasn't just that they had asked me. They had already made the decision for me. My opinion, my ownership of my house, didn't seem to matter at all. "You can't just decide that for me," I said slowly, keeping my voice level. "This is my home. You don't get to hand it out like it's an extra bedroom in your house." Mom's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. "Ryan, we're not trying to take anything from you. This is family. You have a responsibility to look out for each other." "I have been looking out for everyone for years," I said, my voice rising slightly despite my best effort to stay calm. "I helped pay for Matt's tuition. I loaned him money when he wrecked his first car. I even fixed your washing machine for free when you said you couldn't afford a repairman. At what point do I get to have something that's just mine?" The room went quiet for a beat. Dad finally looked up from the mail, frowning. "Don't take that tone with your mother. She's just trying to keep this family together. By taking my house." I shot back before I could stop myself. Matt rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic. I'm not asking for a key to the safe, just a place to crash. I thought we were closer than this." The manipulation was so obvious, it almost made me laugh. Matt wasn't the one making sacrifices, I was. He was the one everyone catered to, and I was expected to smile and make it easier for him. "I'm not agreeing to anything today," I said finally, standing up. "I need time to think." Mom stood too, looking frustrated. "Ryan, don't make this into a bigger deal than it is. If you keep dragging this out, Matt will have to spend money on a rental, and that's just wasteful." I didn't say anything else. I just left. That night, I got another message, this time from my aunt. "Hey, I heard about the house thing. Don't be selfish. Matt really needs the help." I stared at the message, realizing that Mom must have called half the family to tell them her version of the story. Suddenly, I wasn't just dealing with my immediate family. I was being painted as the villain to everyone. The next day, Dad showed up at my house unannounced. I was sitting on the porch when he pulled into the driveway. He didn't even say hello. "You need to stop making this so hard," he said, walking up to me. "This isn't a big deal. Your brother has always been there for you." I almost laughed. Always been there for me. When? When I worked double shifts so he could borrow money for spring break. Or when I had to take the bus because he totaled my car and you said we couldn't afford to fix it. Dad's face tightened. "You're keeping score now? That's not what family does." I stood, finally feeling the anger boiling over. "No, Dad. What family doesn't do is take advantage of one kid just to make life easier for the other." He didn't like that. He muttered something about me being ungrateful and left without another word. For the next few days, the messages kept coming. Guilt trips, little digs, subtle threats about how disappointed they were in me. Each one was like a brick being added to a wall between us. By the end of the week, I had stopped replying entirely. But I wasn't just sitting in silence. Every night, after work, I'd sit at my kitchen table with a notepad, thinking, if they were willing to push this hard before Matt had even stayed a single night, what would happen if I gave in? Would they start telling me what furniture to buy, what room he could have, what nights he'd be there? No, I wasn't going to let that happen. I didn't know exactly how I was going to handle it yet, but one thing was certain. The next time they came to me about the house, I wouldn't be caught off guard. And judging by the message I got from Mom that Friday, "We're coming by tomorrow to talk. Be home." That time was coming sooner than I thought. I closed my phone, took a deep breath, and looked around my house. The house that was mine. For the first time in days, I felt something sharper than sadness, resolve. If they wanted a conversation, they were going to get one. Saturday morning came with an uneasy quiet. I woke up earlier than usual, not because of an alarm, but because my mind wouldn't let me sleep in. Mom's text from last night echoed in my head. "We're coming by tomorrow to talk. Be home." It wasn't a request. It was an order. I tried to distract myself by tidying up, but every sound in the house felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, even the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. Around 10 a.m., a car door slammed outside. My stomach tightened as I peeked through the window. Sure enough, my parents were walking up the path to my front porch, Matt trailing behind them with a cocky grin and a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. I opened the door before they could knock. "Morning," Mom said briskly, brushing past me like she owned the place. Dad followed, looking grim, and Matt walked in last, glancing around like he was inspecting the property. "Nice place," he said casually, setting the duffel bag down by the couch. I frowned. "What's that?" "My stuff," he replied with a shrug. "Thought I'd save us all time since we already know how this is going to go." That single sentence made my blood run cold. They hadn't just come to talk. They had come to move him in. Mom turned to me, clasping her hands together like she was about to deliver good news. "Ryan, we've thought about this a lot. It just makes sense. Matt's commute is brutal, and this house is sitting here with extra space. Why wouldn't we make use of it?" I crossed my arms, my pulse starting to quicken. "Because it's my house. And you didn't ask. You just assumed I'd go along with it." Dad sighed, already looking impatient. "Son, this is a practical solution. Stop being so stubborn." Matt flopped onto the couch, pulling out his phone like he was settling in for the afternoon. "I don't get why you're making this such a big deal. You've got 3 bedrooms. You'll barely even notice I'm here." I stared at him, then at the duffel bag on the floor. The sheer audacity of it hit me all at once. They hadn't just ignored my feelings, they had already decided for me. "No," I said finally, my voice firm. Mom blinked. "No, no," I repeated, louder this time. "Matt's not staying here. Not for a night, not for a week, not at all." For a split second, there was silence. Then Mom's expression hardened. "Ryan, don't be ridiculous," she said sharply. "We drove all the way here. Matt took time off to get ready for this. You're not going to embarrass us by making a scene." I felt my chest tighten. "Making a scene? You showed up to my house with his bags without my permission. You're the ones making a scene." Matt finally looked up from his phone, smirking. "Wow, someone's touchy. You really think this house makes you the boss now?" That was the last straw. "Get your stuff and leave," I said quietly, my hands shaking. Mom gasped like I had just cursed at her. "Ryan, you are not kicking your brother out of your house." "Yes, I am," I snapped. "Because this is my house, not yours. And you don't get to decide who lives here." Dad stood up, towering over me. Watch your tone. We raised you better than this. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. You raised me to put everyone else first. To pay for things I couldn't afford so Matt could have what he wanted. To work twice as hard just to get half the recognition. Not this time. The room went silent except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Fine, Mom said after a long pause, her voice cold. If that's how you want to be, we'll do this the hard way. Before I could ask what she meant, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She dropped it onto my kitchen counter with a loud slap. What is this? I asked, walking over and opening it. My heart sank as I saw what was inside. A printed out listing for my house, complete with mortgage details, property value estimates, and tax information. We've spoken to a lawyer, Mom said matter-of-factly. Technically, you're not married, and you don't have kids. This house is wasted space on you. We think it's in the family's best interest if Matt eventually buys it from you. I stared at her, stunned. You want me to sell you my house? Not sell. Transfer, Dad corrected. We'd work out a fair arrangement. You'd still have a place to stay for holidays. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. They weren't just asking me to let Matt stay here temporarily. They were openly plotting to take the house from me entirely. This is insane, I said finally, my voice quiet but shaking. You skipped my housewarming to celebrate Matt's car, and now you're standing in my kitchen trying to take my house. Mom crossed her arms. Stop acting like a victim. You bought a house earlier than we expected. You should be happy you're in a position to help your family. Help. That word again. Help always meant me giving something up. Matt leaned back on the couch, smirking. Honestly, bro, you're overreacting. You've always been good at bouncing back. You'll be fine. I felt something in me snap. Not anger, not even sadness, just a cold, crystal clear resolve. Get out, I said, my voice low. Mom's eyes narrowed. Ryan, get out. There was a long pause, but something in my tone must have gotten through because Dad finally grabbed Matt's bag and shoved it toward him. This isn't over, Dad said as they headed for the door. I didn't answer. I just stood there, my fists clenched, watching them leave. When the door finally closed behind them, I let out a long, shaky breath. My hands were still trembling, but I wasn't scared anymore. No, I was done being scared. Because if they were willing to go this far just to control something that was mine, then I needed to start thinking 3 steps ahead. I needed to stop just defending myself and start making a plan. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just going to say no. I was going to make sure they never tried anything like this again. The house was so quiet after they left that I could hear my own heartbeat. I sank into one of the dining chairs, staring at the folder they'd left on the counter. The papers sat there like a threat, like proof that I wasn't imagining how far they were willing to go. I flipped through the pages again, this time more carefully, mortgage data, property tax estimates, even notes in Mom's handwriting. One of them read, "Ask about adding Matt to title?" My chest tightened. I stayed at that table for hours, not moving, barely blinking. Part of me kept waiting for my phone to buzz with an apology. A call, a text, anything to say they realized they had gone too far. But when it finally did buzz, it wasn't an apology. Mom had written, "I hope you're happy. Your father is furious. Matt is staying with friends tonight, but this is only temporary. You're being selfish and short-sighted." I read the message 3 times before putting the phone face down. It felt like someone had pressed all the air out of me. My own family thought I was selfish for not handing over the only thing I had worked years to get. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the moment they walked in, the duffel bag thumping against the couch, the way Matt had smirked like he had already won. My housewarming decorations were still up, the cheap fairy lights, the welcome cake sitting untouched in the fridge, and looking at them now made me feel almost foolish, like I had been naive for thinking they'd be happy for me. The next few days were worse. The silence from my family wasn't peaceful, it was loaded. They didn't call to apologize, but word started trickling in through cousins and extended relatives. My aunt texted me, "You really upset your parents. They said you kicked them out." Another cousin chimed in, "Why are you being so hard on Matt? It's just a house. Just a house." I stopped responding. I stopped checking the family group chat altogether. I muted it and left my phone on the counter, face down. I went to work, came home, sat in the dark living room, and just existed. The place that had felt so alive and full of potential just a week ago now felt heavy, like it was carrying their disapproval in every corner. Even sitting on my own couch felt like a fight, like I had to defend my right to simply be there. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the back porch. The yard was quiet except for the chirping of crickets, and for the first time, I let myself really feel everything at once. The sadness, the anger, the exhaustion. I had spent years being the good son, the one who kept the peace, who helped out, who sacrificed. And now, the first time I drew a line, they made me out to be the villain. I thought about all the little moments I had brushed off before. The times Matt had borrowed my car and returned it empty on gas. The times I'd covered his share of bills and gotten nothing but a shrug in return. The birthdays they had forgotten, the job promotions they had barely acknowledged. Maybe I had been ignoring it for too long. That was the night I decided to stop waiting for an apology that was never coming. The next morning, I started locking everything down, literally and figuratively. I changed the locks on the house, not because they had a key, I hadn't given them one, but because the idea of them showing up unannounced again made my stomach churn. I updated the alarm system password. I started keeping my car in the garage, out of sight. I also started pulling back from the family in other ways. I stopped showing up for Sunday dinners. When Mom called, I let it go to voicemail. When Dad texted, I left it on read. I didn't explain myself, didn't argue. I just went silent. At work, people started to notice I was quieter than usual, but I poured myself into my projects. Staying late wasn't a burden, it was an escape. The office became the one place where I didn't feel judged or pressured to justify myself. But every night, I came home to that same empty house, and every night it reminded me why I had to do all of this. One Saturday, about a week after the confrontation, I drove out to a quiet trail just outside of town. I hadn't been hiking in years, but something about being out there, surrounded by trees and fresh air, helped me think clearly. I sat on a rock overlooking a small stream and pulled out my phone. I scrolled through old photos, Matt's graduation, Matt's first car, Matt's birthday dinners, and noticed how many of those moments I had been the one behind the camera, taking pictures of everyone else celebrating. There were hardly any photos of me. I had been present for everyone else's big moments, but when it came time for mine, they couldn't even show up. By the time I stood up and started walking back down the trail, something inside me had solidified. I wasn't going to fight them for scraps of respect anymore. If they wanted to paint me as selfish, fine, I would let them. But I wasn't going to be manipulated into giving them what they wanted. And as I walked back to my car, I realized something else. I didn't just want to protect my house. I wanted to protect my peace. That night, I sat down with a notepad at the kitchen table. The same spot where I had been sitting when Mom called me that first night. This time, though, my mind wasn't foggy. I started writing down everything I needed to do, financially, legally, emotionally, to make sure no one could take this house from me. I made a list of lawyers in town. I looked up what it would take to put my house into a trust. I checked into tenants' rights and property laws, just in case. And as I sat there, making plans in the quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt since before this all started: control. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was the first step toward taking my life back. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because if they thought I was going to keep rolling over and letting them decide my future, they were in for a shock. Once I started writing things down, it became easier to breathe. The list on my notepad was long, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: direction. Instead of sitting around waiting for the next guilt trip message, I now had a plan. The first step was talking to a lawyer. It felt strange making an appointment to discuss something as serious as property protection, but the attorney I met with, a calm, sharp-eyed woman named Allison, made me feel like I was finally on solid ground. I explained the situation carefully, leaving out as much of the raw emotion as I could, and asked what could be done to make sure no one could challenge my ownership. Allison nodded thoughtfully, scribbling notes as I spoke. "You've done everything right so far," she said. "Your name is the only one on the title, so no one has any claim to it. But if you're worried about interference, there are options, like putting the house into a living trust in your name, or setting up a legal notice preventing any transfers without your approval." It was the first time in this whole ordeal that someone had told me I had power, that I had the ability to keep what was mine safe. I left her office with a folder full of documents and a checklist of steps to take. At work, things were starting to shift too. I had been volunteering for extra projects partly to distract myself, But now I realized those late nights were getting noticed. My boss called me into her office one Thursday afternoon and said, "Ryan, you've been knocking it out of the park lately. I want you to lead the next client presentation." Normally, that would have terrified me, but for the first time in months, I felt ready for it. I threw myself into preparing, staying late to polish every detail of the presentation. The day of the meeting, I walked into the conference room in my best suit and delivered the pitch with a calm confidence I didn't know I had. By the time I finished, the client was nodding enthusiastically. That afternoon, my boss pulled me aside and said, "If we land this contract, you'll be in line for a raise." It wasn't just about the money, though that would help. It was the validation. I was being seen, appreciated, recognized for what I brought to the table. I started to notice other small changes too. I began going for runs in the evenings instead of sitting on the porch stewing. At first it was exhausting, but after a few weeks, I found myself running farther, my lungs burning less, my head clearer when I got home. The anger that had been sitting in my chest started to feel like fuel instead of a weight. My social circle, which had felt painfully small for so long, began to grow again. One weekend, a coworker invited me to a barbecue at his place. I almost said no, but something in me knew I needed to go. I showed up with a six-pack and found myself laughing with people I barely knew by the end of the night. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was living in Matt's shadow. I was just Ryan, a guy with a decent job, a house, and a life that was starting to take shape. But as good as things were getting, the silence from my family didn't go away. Every so often, Mom would leave a voicemail. "We miss you, Ryan." Or, "Your brother's been struggling, you know." But there was no apology, no acknowledgement of what they had tried to do. I still hadn't unmuted the family group chat, and part of me wondered if I ever would. One Friday evening, after work, I went to a local hardware store and bought some paint. I had been staring at the bland beige walls of my living room for weeks, and I finally decided it was time to make the space mine. It took me all weekend, but by Sunday night the room was a soft, warm blue, the kind that made the whole house feel calmer. I strung up new lights, rearranged the furniture, and hung up a framed photo I had taken on my hiking trip. Standing there in the middle of the room, paint on my hands, I felt something shift. This wasn't just a house anymore, it was my home. And no matter what my parents thought, they weren't going to take it away from me. The next step on my list was financial. I met with a banker to set up a separate savings account, one that no one in my family even knew existed. I started automating transfers every payday so that I could quietly build a cushion. Part of me was thinking about the future, about travel, about maybe starting a side business. But another part of me knew I might need that money for whatever was coming next. Because I knew this wasn't over. One evening, while I was eating dinner and scrolling through my phone, I saw a new post from my cousin Sarah, a photo of Matt at a fancy restaurant, grinning over a steak the size of a dinner plate. The caption read, "Celebrating a big move." My stomach tightened. I knew that grin. It was the same one he wore when he had walked into my house with his duffel bag. Sure enough, the next morning I got a message from Dad. "We need to talk. Call me." I didn't call. Instead, I went back to my list. I called Allison, the lawyer, and told her I wanted to go through with the living trust. I spent the afternoon signing papers, notarizing forms, making everything official. When I walked out of her office, my house was no longer just something I owned. It was legally shielded. Driving home that day, with the sun setting and my favorite song playing on the radio, I felt something I hadn't felt since before this all started. Peace. But it wasn't just peace. It was power. And for the first time, I realized that whatever came next, I wouldn't just be reacting. I would be ready. The following week, things at work took another turn in my favor. The client we had pitched to sign the contract, and just like my boss promised, I got a raise. Not a life-changing amount, but enough that I suddenly had breathing room. It meant my savings account would grow faster, and it meant I could start thinking about doing more than just defending what I already had. I took myself out to dinner that night, alone, sitting by the window at a quiet little Italian place. As I ate, I thought about how far I'd come in just a few weeks. The house no longer felt like a place where their voices echoed. It felt like mine again. But there was still something unsettled inside me. Because I knew them. My family didn't let things go. The silence was too deliberate, too calculated. I had grown up watching them use the quiet treatment as a way to break me down. First the guilt, then the forced reconciliation, where I was the one apologizing. This time, I wasn't going to give them the chance. 2 days later, my prediction came true. I was coming back from a run when I saw a familiar car parked near the end of my street. My parents' car. The sight made my stomach clench, but instead of turning around or sneaking inside, I walked straight up the driveway. Mom and Dad were sitting inside, talking. When they saw me, they both got out. We were in the neighborhood. Mom said casually, like that explained everything. No, you weren't, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead. What do you want? Mom's expression tightened at my bluntness, but she pressed on. We wanted to see you and talk about Matt. I almost laughed. Of course it was about Matt. It was always about Matt. He's been looking for a new apartment, Dad added. But it's expensive. You have a big house, Ryan. This is just logical. Logical for you, I said, stepping back. Not for me. Mom's tone sharpened. You can't keep punishing your brother. You're hurting the family. That was the moment I realized. They still didn't get it. In their minds, I was the one causing harm, not them. They had rewritten the whole situation so that I was the selfish one, the villain who refused to help. I'm not punishing anyone, I said slowly. I'm just living in the house I bought. And that's not changing. I expected them to leave after that. But instead, Mom sighed dramatically. You know, we've been talking with your uncle, she said, glancing at Dad before continuing. He thinks it would be smart to see if the deed can be restructured, just so the house stays in the family long term. I stared at her. They were still trying to take it. This time, though, I didn't panic. I didn't even feel that same helpless anger. I just smiled, a small, calm smile that seemed to throw them off. Good luck with that, I said, and turned to go inside. When I shut the door, I felt a strange rush of satisfaction. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I had already taken steps to protect myself. They could talk to whoever they wanted, but the house was now in a trust. They couldn't touch it. That night, as I sat at the kitchen table, I began thinking about what else I could do, not just to protect myself, but to send a clear message that this kind of behavior wouldn't be tolerated. I started looking into local real estate boards and neighborhood associations. If they were going to keep showing up, I wanted to know exactly what my rights were when it came to trespassing. I found out I could formally request that anyone I didn't authorize be kept off my property. I even scheduled a meeting with a security company to discuss adding cameras around the house. But it wasn't just about defense anymore. A week later, at work, my boss offered me a chance to attend a leadership retreat. It was all expenses paid, 3 days at a lakeside resort where we'd learn about project management, negotiation, and strategic planning. I almost turned it down. Part of me still felt guilty for spending money or time on myself. But then I thought about the duffel bag hitting my couch and Matt's smirk. I said yes. The retreat turned out to be exactly what I needed. During one of the sessions, a speaker talked about boundaries, not in the personal sense, but in business. If you don't define the terms of engagement, he said, someone else will define them for you. That line hit me like a freight train, because that was exactly what had been happening my whole life. My family had been defining the terms, who got what, who sacrificed, who gave in, and I had just gone along with it. On the last night of the retreat, I stayed up late by the fire pit, notebook in hand, and started writing again. This time, though, it wasn't just about legal steps or savings goals. I wrote out what I wanted my life to look like 6 months from now, a year from now, where I wanted to be financially, emotionally, even socially. And as I wrote, I felt something shift. This wasn't just about keeping my house anymore. This was about taking control of my entire life. When I got home, I threw myself into the plan. I picked up a few freelance gigs on the side, using the extra income to accelerate my savings. I hired the security company to install discrete cameras around the property. I even joined a local homeowners association, not because I wanted to go to meetings, but because I wanted to know the rules inside and out. Then, something unexpected happened. A friend from work mentioned that Matt had been bragging about a possible promotion, but also that he'd been spending money recklessly and might be in over his head. My coworker's husband worked at the same company as Matt and had overheard him complaining about credit card debt and car payments. That piece of information settled into my mind like a puzzle piece clicking into place. Because now I knew something they didn't think I knew. Matt wasn't just looking for a place to stay because it was convenient. He needed one because he was struggling. And suddenly, I wasn't just defending my space. I had leverage. I didn't do anything with it right away. I waited, quietly adding to my plan, quietly building up my resources. But deep down, I knew the next time they tried to push me, I wouldn't just push back. I'd be ready to flip the entire situation on its head. The moment came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, almost a month after my last confrontation with my parents. I had been patient, painfully patient, waiting for them to try again. And sure enough, they did. Mom called first, her voice almost syrupy. "Ryan, honey, we've been talking. We think it's time to revisit the conversation about the house. Can we stop by tonight?" A month ago, that question would have sent my chest tightening with dread. But this time, I smiled as I sat at my kitchen table, looking over my notes. "Sure," I said calmly. "Come by at 6. The moment I hung up, I got to work. First, I made sure the cameras I had installed were recording. Then I set out 2 chairs at the kitchen table, directly across from where I would sit. I even brewed a pot of coffee and put out mugs, not because I planned to play host, but because I wanted them comfortable. People say more when they feel at ease. By the time the clock hit 6, I was ready. Their car pulled into the driveway right on time. I opened the door before they knocked, gesturing them inside like nothing was wrong. Dad seemed wary, but Mom smiled like this was some kind of reconciliation dinner. "We're glad you agreed to talk," she said as they sat down. I nodded, sitting opposite them. "So, let's talk." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mom launched into the speech I'd been expecting, about how Matt was struggling, about how I was the only one who could help, about how family was supposed to make sacrifices. I let her go on, nodding occasionally, keeping my face calm. When she finished, I leaned forward slightly. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said before, about doing the right thing for the family. And I agree, which is why I wanted you both to come here." I slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the legal paperwork Allison had prepared, the trust documents, the notarized agreements, and a notice formally stating that no one was allowed on the property without my consent. Mom's smile faltered as she flipped through the pages. "What is this?" "It's legal protection," I said evenly. "This house is now in a trust, which means it can't be sold, transferred, or used as collateral without my approval. And because I've filed a notice of no trespass, if anyone, including Matt, shows up here without my permission, I can have them removed. Legally." Dad's jaw tightened. "You went to a lawyer?" "Yes," I said. "I took your advice. You said to think about the future and do what's best for everyone. This is what's best for me. And since I'm the only one paying for this house, that's the decision that matters." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the fridge. Mom finally set the papers down. "Ryan, this is extreme. We're just asking you to be reasonable." "No," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You're asking me to give up my peace so Matt can avoid facing the consequences of his choices. That's not reasonable. That's manipulation." Dad's face darkened. "You're making a mistake. Family is all you have." I smiled faintly. "Then maybe you should have treated me like family before trying to take the one thing I worked for." That was when I played my final card. "I know about Matt's situation," I said quietly, watching their faces. "The car payments, the credit card debt, the fact that he can't afford his own place. That's not my problem. And it's not going to become my problem." Mom's mouth opened slightly, shocked that I knew. Dad's eyes narrowed. "You've been talking to people," he said slowly. "I've been paying attention," I corrected. "And I've been taking notes. Every message you sent me, every voicemail, every visit, I have it all documented." I gestured toward the small camera on the counter, its light blinking softly. "And now I have this conversation too. So if you ever try to pressure me again, or spread lies about me to the rest of the family, I'll have proof." The silence that followed was heavy, but I didn't look away. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said after a moment. "I'm doing it because I need boundaries. If you can respect them, great. If not, I'll enforce them." I stood, signaling that the conversation was over. "Coffee?" I asked lightly, as if nothing serious had just been said. Neither of them answered. They left a few minutes later, Dad muttering something under his breath, Mom looking shaken. As their car pulled out of the driveway, I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in months. This wasn't just a victory, it was a shift in the entire balance of power. They had come expecting me to fold. Instead, they left knowing that every attempt to pressure me from now on would come with consequences. I locked the door, poured myself a cup of the coffee I'd brewed, and sat at the kitchen table. For the first time, the silence in the house didn't feel oppressive. It felt like freedom. And though I wasn't done, not yet, I knew I had just taken back control of the narrative. The next move was theirs. And whatever it was, I'd be ready. The next few days were oddly quiet, too quiet. After the confrontation, I half expected another round of angry texts or late-night voicemails, but nothing came. No calls, no guilt-tripping messages, not even a passive-aggressive meme in the group chat. At first I wondered if this was just the calm before the storm, but as the week dragged on, I realized something. They were regrouping. I kept living my life. I went to work, focused on projects, kept running in the evenings, and even started redecorating another room in the house. Every little change I made, new curtains, a new shelf, a photo I hung on the wall, felt like reclaiming another piece of my space. Then, one Friday evening, I got the message that made everything click into place. It wasn't from Mom or Dad this time, it was from Matt. It read, "You win. Hope you're happy. Lost the car. Might be moving back home." I read it 3 times, the corners of my mouth slowly turning up. I didn't reply, but a few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Dad. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice was heavy, tired. "Your mother and I wanted to let you know that Matt had to return the SUV. He couldn't keep up with the payments." I stayed quiet, waiting for the inevitable follow-up. "He's going to be staying with us for a while," Dad continued reluctantly. "It'll be tight, but we'll manage." There it was. The shift. The quiet acknowledgement that the plan to use my house had failed. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said evenly. And I meant it, not because I wanted Matt to lose his car, but because I knew this was going to be hard for him. Hard, but necessary. There was a pause on the other end. Then Dad sighed. "Ryan, we might have gone too far." I blinked, surprised. My father was not a man who admitted fault easily. "We just wanted to make things easier for him," he said quietly. "But we should have respected that this house is yours. Your mother knows that now too." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. "I hope so," I said finally. "Because if you ever try something like that again, you know what will happen." "We know," Dad said. When we hung up, I sat there for a while, letting the weight of that conversation settle in. It wasn't an apology that erased everything, but it was an acknowledgement, and that was enough for now. The next weekend, Mom called and asked if she could come by alone. I said yes, cautiously. She arrived with a plate of homemade cookies, the kind she used to bake when I was a kid. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where so many of our fights had started, and for the first time in months, we actually talked. "I pushed too hard," she admitted, stirring her coffee. "We all did. I think we forgot that you're not just part of this family. You're your own person too." I nodded slowly. "That's all I've ever wanted you to see." She reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. "I see it now, and I'm proud of you. For buying this house. For standing up for yourself." Something in my chest loosened at those words. I didn't know if everything could ever go back to how it was, but maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe things weren't supposed to go back. Maybe this was a new beginning, one with boundaries, respect, and balance. When she left, I stood by the door for a moment, looking around my home. The late afternoon light was streaming through the windows, warm and golden, and for the first time, I felt at peace. A week later, I hosted a second housewarming. This time, just for the friends I'd made at work and a couple of neighbors I'd gotten to know. The house was full of laughter, music, and the smell of good food. No guilt, no tension, no duffel bags waiting to be unpacked. And as I stood in the kitchen, drink in hand, looking out at the people smiling and chatting in my living room, I realized something. This was what a home was supposed to feel like. Not a bargaining chip, not a symbol of obligation. A place where I could be myself, on my own terms. Later that night, when everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, I stepped out onto the porch. The sky was clear, the stars bright. I thought about the months of tension, the fights, the tears I had hidden when no one could see. And I smiled, because I had faced them down, stood my ground, and come out stronger. I took a slow sip of my drink, feeling the cool night air. They thought they could take my house. I murmured to myself, a quiet satisfaction in my voice. Turns out, all they did was teach me how to protect it. And with that, I turned off the porch light and went inside, closing the door behind me, not to shut the world out, but to finally, fully live in the home that was mine.